Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bevvies with the Boys. We're here in episode 3. I'm Munchballs. This is Dagda above me. We are the boys, and today for Bevvies, we are joined by Kelsey Moser and Raz. So let's do a quick old whip around and introduce everyone. So we'll start with you, Kelsey. For anyone that doesn't know you, can you give yourself an introduction and let everyone know what you're drinking tonight?
Yeah, so right now I'm a coach for North American Academy team 100 Thieves. I have done a lot of history with covering Europe and China, so a lot of people still know me for that. But yeah, I'm here today to talk about Worlds and drink a tin cup rye. I had a lot of thoughts about this because, I could have gone for something sweet, like a makura or hakushu to celebrate the Chinese victories, or something smoky for the spicy games. But you gotta pour one out for the North American boys. That's all I have to say. And as is tradition, when TSM and LGD are in the same group, I must drink my whiskey out of the coffee mug. So
I thought you were actually going to pour some out onto your desk then, just for the sake of drama.
no, I'm too lazy to clean that up, so
Yeah,
it's not gonna happen.
understandable. I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
And over to you, Raz. Do you want to give yourself a quick little introduction and let us know what you're drinking today?
Yeah, well, name is Brento Raz Mohammed. I am the coach of an academy team for Golden Guardians, former color caster in the LPL, and yeah, what I'm drinking, I cheated. I'm drinking coffee. Just keeping myself awake. All right, I'm trying to survive out here. My
Reasonable.
nocturnal self.
You could have
And
gotten Irish
I was going to
coffee,
say,
Get
the
a
exact same.
shot in there.
All I'm gonna
That's
say
the
is you
stuff,
thought I would
man.
stop at
You don't
one
even
coffee.
notice you're drunk.
I got 2 cups of coffee.
Oh my goodness, he's going the
Yeah.
other direction.
See, double fist. I thought about doing the thing with like a mug of coffee and a mug of whiskey, like that.
Yep.
I thought that would be very appropriate because both of us are in America, so it is.
I'm not gonna lie.
But you know what? I have no shame. So
I'm
I
in
don't
Europe
give
and
a fuck.
I'm doing precisely that, just in a
Oh, there we go.
different way. Doug, did you want to go next then, mate?
Yeah, so I'm going to be drinking Corona. That's my beer of choice today. I'm decided to mix it up a little bit,
Very
move
exotic.
away from the Tesco vodka, get myself something a little bit better. But yeah, so that's what I'm going to be drinking. And then yeah, I'm one of the LPL casters in case people who don't watch the show a huge amount at the moment. Trying to replace Raz and failing miserably, but we'll keep trying anyway.
Raz is irreplaceable. But
you guys have been killing it. You guys have been killing it. I loved it.
It's not about replacing Raz, Rob. It's about carving your own
exactly,
part of the LPL.
exactly.
True.
I'm going to be
There can only
drinking.
be one Raz.
Exactly. I'm going to be drinking Spitfire, which is very patriotic. Which, for anyone that doesn't know, is the best aeroplane to ever have been created. It's the dogfighter that we used in World War One, and it's an amber ale from Kent. So there you go. I'm going to pour myself a pint, and while I do that, let's begin the conversation with. Let's just start with kind of like a shotgun spray of what on earth has happened over the course of groups, because we've had some shenanigans, I think it's fair to say. But I will say there's been less upsets than maybe previous years. I feel like a lot of the results across the course of this week have been majoritively expected. Would you say that's a fair statement? Whoever wants to give that a go.
I'll take it.
It's fair.
I'll take it. Yeah, I think it's completely fair because like this is the first time in a long time that my pick'ems were actually just accurate, right? In fact, I think
You got perfect
the
pick'ems?
the one aberration, 2 aberrations. The first one would being like I lacked faith from LGD after watching their plans, so I put them in last place. I think that one thing that actually like made it harder for me. And the other one is what was it again? It was a Group B. Oh yeah, Rogue. I actually had Rogue as third place,
yeah,
but they ended up losing. Those are the only real, I think, upsets in terms of like placements. Otherwise, it felt like every team that it came into the tournament with certain expectation or strong ended up achieving that, from my point of view.
So I knew that the only way that TSM could win games was if Bjergsen went insane, and I knew that Shia was a better mid laner, so I did not make that mistake, Raz.
God.
So I actually had that group completely accurate. I did not, however, I had G2 over Suning, and I had a Jingdong over Damwon. I don't think those placements are that controversial though, since they did like both technically went 1-1 in the main part of the plan, excluding tiebreakers. So other than that, I think it's pretty normal. I had a conversation with Emily Rand before this, and we were gonna do a content piece that I can't release for some reason, but effectively, I said that if top esports doesn't go 6-0 in Group D, then it's really doomed for them. But then she made a very solid point, which is that Chinese teams will literally never go undefeated in group stage. So
Yeah,
that's about it.
I think with top esports specifically, it does not matter how good they look. They are going to drop a best of one. Like, the amount of times I have seen Jackie Love just like forwards into 5 people just because he thinks that maybe he could pull this off this time and just die immediately across the course of this season.
Dude,
like,
if
someone's going to
try to take the 4v5, you don't know if you can.
Exactly.
You just don't.
Yeah.
If you're not going to limit on the world, if you're not going to limit test on the world stage, when are you going to limit test really?
Yeah.
But that was the thing. Every single chat that we had about the LPL was like, yeah, top esports going 0-6 or 6-0 even. And myself and Munch were there and be like, whoa, okay, they're really, really good. But at some point, something's going to happen where they just throw it away. And I mean, we saw today, there's always one that's going to go awry.
One thing I will say though, the game today was not actually just them like trolling. Like, I don't want to take away from FlyQuest, because I actually think FlyQuest played exceptionally well to close that game out. Because I've seen top esports come back from games like that before, and FlyQuest didn't allow that.
I think they didn't have a lot of tools to come back. And the other thing that I will take from NA teams is they had to use level 1s to compensate for the fact that, honestly, their laning fundamentals are trash. So basically, every effective win from an NA team was with a good level 1.
I like the fire that you're coming in with right from the start of the episode here.
I mean, someone who works in the region has a lot of vitriol, watching the teams every day.
Yeah, you've seen we've both seen a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll say that I also like FlyQuest drafting for the majority of the tournament, especially when they beat top esports. I don't understand the idea of teams kind of foregoing Lilia. Especially like the Graves Lilia trade has been a thing that teams have been doing a lot, where I feel like Lilia is just incredibly strong. Maybe, but regardless of that, like I thought the Azir pick, and then I thought Azir was a really good pick. I thought the Nara to Urgot was strong as well. Like top esports kind of picked for comp for Knight, which like put him in a pretty bad matchup with Galio versus Azir. And of course, like not even necessarily for the lane, but I mean like especially for team fights, Galio is just so doomed going into into that comp. So I really enjoyed what FlyQuest had for the draft. And that was just, I think, a constant that they've had throughout. But obviously, like the top side was just so bad throughout the tournament, which really hurt them. So, and they also just do not ever play to top. Like, I understand that a weak side exists, but then just like never covering, I thought was just was an issue that I had.
They just take their top laner's name a little too seriously, I think, honestly.
I feel like that's really consistent with Santorin. If you watch his games, is that he just like will decide one side is doomed on a team that he's on and just never go there. Just never go there. Pretty much every roster that Santorin's been on, it has had like a lane where he just never goes there because he thinks it's not going to work out or something. I can't really say exactly why. It just ends up not. I also think that I thought FlyQuest's drafts were decent with the caveat that they understood that they weren't going to be able to play the really lane dominant style. And I think that this is a mistake that some of the other NA teams made, which was like everyone on Twitter was saying, play aggressive, just try. But it's if you don't actually understand the matchups and the win conditions and how to actually punish, you're not going to be able to play those champs. And that's not something that you can learn in a week.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
not. So
Yeah.
they just kind of stuck to something that was comfortable for them and that they knew how to execute to an extent, even if you watch the laning phases and a lot of it was really weird. They understood what they were doing within that context, and they knew they weren't going to play the lane matchups optimally, and they weren't going to learn the matchups overnight. And they just executed well on what they knew how to do. So that was fun.
I actually think that, and I'm just at the risk of like ping ponging like different topics because I agree with that. I thought the takeaway that the audience or the fans had with Team Liquid's drafting was not the correct takeaway, where the first like 2 games, like the first one, the one versus Suning and the one versus Machi, those were really just for me. I thought this was such bad drafting, right? And then by week 2, or at least the second round robin, everyone was like, oh, now they're just playing really aggressively and all of that. And I was like, well, I mean, I feel like their compositions just have identity and that like they're just playing through their comp. And like that was something where I felt like if they had just played a scaling comp or whatever it may be, I would still back it because like that's just them playing to a reasonable draft.
At least there's a goal there, yeah.
Yeah, and I still like I agree with the sentiment of North American teams having at least like an understanding how to play against aggressive teams or being able to play more active. But I felt like the takeaway was like, oh, well, Team Liquid did well because of the, headstrong, like Kalista set comps. Whereas, like, well, I just think that they were much more mindful when they won in the draft.
I think so. This is an interesting callback to Fnatic from 2018, which was at the time Marcus and Hillsong's laning was really god awful, man. Like,
Yeah.
And Hillsong had huge champion pool issues. Everyone pointed to Reckless, I think, at that MSI, but Hillsong had to pick Braum, man, or Rakan. That was basically the extent of his champion pool, guys, or Pyke maybe. And then so in Fnatic would basically just drill level 1s all the time to compensate for that because they would always start with an advantage on Braum. They wouldn't have to deal with it. And that's what it felt like because Team Liquid only won games where they had an effective level 1. So they priored the Zed pick, they priored the Pantheon pick, and then they just went into the jungle. And the LPL teams or the other teams were just kind of like, we can handshake this. And so they always got a kill.
Oh my,
They always got a kill. So they always went to lane with an advantage. And then you wouldn't have the situation where they played Kate Lux. And then even though they got the level 1 kill, they didn't punish it or they didn't do anything with it. You wouldn't have that situation, right? And they weren't like properly spacing the targets in that lane as well. I've been watching a lot of ProView and getting the most out of my $7 from Billy, but
wait, how are you even paying? Oh my goodness, we're gonna have to talk about this. Actually,
we can circle back on Billy.
Yeah.
But the big thing is, I think you just don't have to necessarily play like super, super well if you're going into the lane with already an advantage because the other team won't want to trade with you or they will feel pressured not to, right? So you can play your lane the way that you feel comfortable playing it or the way that you understand the matchup, even if it isn't 100% perfect, and then just win the game that way. So I think that was something that was an adaptation that Team Liquid made, but it was definitely a masking adaptation for sure. And I mean, huge props to them because it was like there were a lot of discussions on Twitter of people saying, what if we just told NA teams that they were eliminated from the beginning? Well, that's usually the opposite story, right? Like NA teams just stick to trying to do what they're doing. And if they don't get coin flip wins from it, then they just kind of fade out. So it's good that they made some adaptation. Good that they acknowledged like certain weaknesses that they had. And that's for me the most positive takeaway from NA's Worlds, honestly. So
yeah, I mean, I think with 2 teams going 3-3 as well, I think this is more successful than previous Worlds for NA. So thumbs up there. Maybe next year, perhaps. But let's talk about the groups quickly. I want to spend like maybe 15 to 20 minutes just going through each group, and we'll just hammer home the points on those at the end of this week. And then I want to talk about the quarterfinals because I think that there's a lot of conversations to have about the quarterfinals. The fact that we have an LPL bracket with one imposter and an LCK bracket with one imposter. I cannot believe we are only going to have one potential slot for an LPL LCK best of 5 this year. That is actually ridiculous, but we'll come back to that. So let's start off with Group A then. Suning first seed, G2 second seed, Team Liquid third seed, and then Machi in last place. And I think the most exciting thing about this was, first off, A, we got a tiebreaker, but B, we got to see Suning and G2 fighting out 3 games, and all 3 games were awesome. Bin got, I think, probably the best play of the entire tournament so far on the Gangplank. Like, that I felt like that was almost the best of 3 series in of itself, the way that those last 2 games stacked together like that. But that, I think, was the most exciting part of the entire tournament so far, for me at least. Like, watching that final game between those 2 teams felt more important than just first and second seed. You know, that felt like a playoff game already.
Yeah, I think those games are really fun to watch as a fan, which was was definitely needed, because there were certain groups that were just really boring to watch if you were watching it live.
Yep.
So Suning and G2, I think, great team fighters, and also I think Suning are just limit testers. Like Bin will just there'll be moments where it feels like it. Like he'll definitely test his limits, or just kind of go for a specific like fight or something when he doesn't have vision or like an idea of where people are. You know what I mean? So there are a lot of those that I really enjoy about Suning, and you get to see it out of SOFM as well. Real fun. I will say though, that barrel play, for me that confused me a little bit, because that was Suning deciding to go for Baron, giving Soul, and then wanting to fight anyways. I was so confused from that entire affair. But because if they were just intending the team fight anyways, then why not just actually
just go for the soul, right?
Just go for the soul yourself.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm not gonna lie, I was watching that as a Suning fan, and I was like, please don't fight them with Infernal Soul. What have you done? Oh god, it's all gonna end.
Dude, I was so hurt. It was like one of those things where I was really concerned, as if they were just gonna lose it.
Yeah.
And then the bin play, I think the first barrel that like chunked them down to 50% HP was like, that one you get the vision advantage. But then when he gets pushed back and he flashes forward barrels, I was like, this guy is nuts. And I really wanted to see that level of Bin, because I think Bin in LPL playoffs I wasn't impressed with. I thought that he actually didn't perform. He performed like pretty averagely. But in the regular season, I know you guys watched his play. He was much, much better. And so I really wanted to see that Bin on stage, and we got to.
Yeah. And the second barrel as well was like, there is a decently high chance that you just click one of the champions instead of the barrel there. And if you do, you pretty much just lose the entire game and get second seed. Like, that was a super high risk play. And I feel like Bin is in that category of players that is more than happy to just roll the dice on everything Suning have done this year so far and try and make that play happen. And he did, right? So you can't really criticize him for it.
Are just that big brained. They knew that if they fought Infernal, they wouldn't funnel the 2 carries into the perfect spot for that barrel. You know, that's what they had it all planned for the whole time. No, realistically,
this was a drilled play.
Yeah, exactly. I was really impressed with Suning though. Like, an extension of what we saw in the regular split from Suning was just how good they are punishing mistakes from people. And I think G2 specifically in those series, well, I'm going to call it a series, were making a lot of mistakes in the early stages where they were given advantages over. But even outside of that, like the individual play, like Angel, who was someone that we kind of were like, yeah, he's good, he's kind of quiet on this team. I think he's had a fantastic performance in groups.
I mean, Angel, the fact that he is a control mage player, everyone knows him as an Azir guy that sometimes plays Kassadin. And then he comes in against G2 and just slams Akali on the table and goes, hey, by the way, I'm a sick Akali and I'm going to tear up the entire early game and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, I did not see that coming. I don't think G2 saw that coming. And it's like, how do you pivot in a game like that when suddenly this control mage player that you've been prepping for is also an insanely good Akali player? Like,
it was only his second Akali game of the entire year. Like, he played 1 game in spring, and that was it.
I mean, I just wanted to say, like, his role on this team is just purely like kind of playing facilitator for SOFM. Uh-oh. Are you jumbled? Is it just me? Is she dead?
You're jumbled a little
I'm
bit,
getting
yeah.
you through. I'm getting you through. Just it was a little bit of a sparkling going on, but I think it's fine.
You mean Kels, right? Or my leg?
You're good, Raz. Kelsey.
Okay, just checking.
I didn't hear anything from Kelsey.
Okay.
Can you talk for a second, Kelsey? Are you good? Uh-oh.
Kelsey, this is HughesNet all over again.
We will
No.
we will circle back on this. Raz, in the meantime, do you want to continue your point?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go for it. Which was, oh yeah, Angel has always been like the facilitating mid laner for his team, and like his primary role will always just be kind of like shoving lane and helping out SFM, and that's something that he's been really good at. And so like the fact that meta's changed to a degree where you can play Akali, and so, and even to a certain extent, like I mean, Syndra's always been playable, but like some games are playing towards him, and I like that. He's able to like perform on that. I remember following Angel from what was it again, when he was in LDL, named as Angelo. For me, I remember him as like a really strong team fighting mid laner that played for Tyloo, and like he was a great swaying player. And I felt as though like he had strong mechanics and that he could be someone that you can play to, and then we're finally getting to see that. So I'm pretty happy about that.
I think that's the big one. I think you're good, Kelsey. Now, are you? Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. But...
My laptop is crashing lately. I think it's okay.
All good. If it happens again, just leave and rejoin.
It can't be a China Talk reboot without technical issues. But
True.
I think I have a lot to say about this particular matchup. So I think G2 are really struggling in the meta. I think the reason Bin plays the way he does is you can almost see it where it's like, okay, I'm just going to play my lane like a psychopath, and I'm going to constantly take trades over and over and over again. And you think that that's like kind of like the Shy, but I feel like the Shy expects Ning to be there. He expects his jungle to be there. Whereas I feel like this is more of a directive of SFM, where it's like, if he's topside, then he's not doing his bot camps. So I'm going to get those. So I don't really care.
What you're saying is Bin is like he's the Raptor agent. His entire job is distract Yankos so SFM can get Raptors. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, or Gromp. I think a Gromp is more, likely, or Gromp or Krugs, higher value camps like that on the opposite side of the map.
The best example of this is literally this Sinning versus TL game, where literally the side of the map gets split. Jax is literally like he's playing Jax versus I freaking forget. It was
Shen.
Volibear.
Oh no, that was MCX. I was thinking of the
Volibear.
MCX game actually. Yeah. The MCX game, Shen completely misplays the matchup and they kill him like 3 times, but SFM is 100 CS of both the enemy jungler. Anyway.
Yeah. And I was talking about the fact that like literally Bin knows that the enemy jungle can only be topside. It's probably behind him on Krugs, and if he decides to ever fight, he is just going to die. But he literally plays the matchup so disrespectfully because he thinks that what's it called? He can get a kill onto Impact, who's misplaying, quote unquote misplaying, and even if he is, it doesn't matter because he should just die in the gank. But like he just doesn't die in the gank, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly. And the fact that he even he doesn't. Like it just gets misplayed. But the fact that he even goes for it just shows a sense of, in my opinion, he doesn't respect the like necessarily the team that he's going up against. Or to your point, which is probably the bigger reason for it, is like, well, for that game it's literally a split map, so it doesn't actually matter. That is disrespect. But for the other games, it's like, yeah, SOFM is just gonna get a lot more, and he has been. He's actually just been consistently getting a CS, an experience advantage versus the junglers.
Yeah.
And I feel like this group really illustrates kind of like this. I read this as a difficult group for Suning because I feel like there were a lot of teams that were going to play globals. And I think mid to late game, their covering of their flanks and their vision control is like really spotty. So they usually get flanked on really easily or they overextend on the map. But I didn't really think as much about the early game where most of the junglers in this group do not play for advantage. So SFM is basically never going to be contested on power farming. I think, honestly, G2's biggest struggle was not understanding how to do that. Because if we talk about the final game, the Akali game where Angel popped off, if you actually watch what Caps does, he pushes like 2 waves, doesn't get the crash off, immediately runs to Raptors, and then Angel is able to actually just crash on Akali. And then, like, if you understand that matchup, you know the lane's basically over, right?
In the
Like,
words of
what are you
K-Troll,
gonna
that's
do?
illegal.
but the fact that they're doing that is just really strange to me because it tells me that like they're misunderstanding kind of how to play for jungle, which is like they're saying, okay, we're gonna stack lanes to play for jungle, which I think you can't do on that team, especially with Caps, because that's how you've been winning all season. And it's not a good look. I think G2 are really, especially since there's a concept called gold value, which is what does the player do with the amount of gold he has. And I think Yankos' gold value is pretty low.
Yeah.
Compared to like someone like SFM. So
I want to ask you guys a question then. So like, and this we'll have this as like the last thing on G2, and then let's move to Group B. But do you guys feel like moving towards quarterfinals, G2 should continue to try and change styles towards having carry junglers and whatnot? Or do you think that they should just double down on what has worked for them in the past, keep focus around mid lane, keep Jankos on what works for Jankos in the past, and kind of ignore the meta to some extent? Or do you think that that's just a doomed strategy from the start? Do you want to go first, Dagda? Because
Yeah, personally, I think they need to stick to what they know. Like, I think Kelsey hit the nail on the head there. Like, the amount of games where I was watching where they try and even commit for a scuttle crab or something like that, and it's just, well, Caps is pushed underneath this tower. He's not able to roam first, and they all end up dying around the scuttle crab because Caps can't get involved. So I think trying to play more towards this style isn't quite working out for them. So I think going back towards something that can work for them, especially when I look at the plays that they would have been able to pull off immaculately if you go back like a season ago, which is these like 4-man dives bot side, even they're pulling them off weird because they're trying to have Caps go up towards the Krugs toward them, or at least have a look to see if SOFM is stolen them away. So I think going back towards, all right, let's just play our style and make sure we're playing it correctly is going to get them far further than trying to do everything at once and then misplaying on what has been fundamentally their strong point.
I think that it doesn't have to be either or. You can still play for like there was when I was watching the G2 TL game, the second one, and everyone obviously on Twitter properly identified, oh my gosh, Brock's topside, how did Impact not crash his wave? Holy shit, man. Like that kind of stuff.
That was wild, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was wild. But you can have like a free situation like that, and Yankos can still like invade the top side because Wonder can just hold the freeze and move if Impact is also moving, right? And then there was a scenario where there were full top camps up, but Yankos still went bottom. And obviously TL were kind of like trolling in that situation, so it was free kills, but there was a world where they could have used that pressure point to create 2v2 situations, won the 2v2s, and then just controlled the top side of the map and kept perma farming it, right? So I think that they can do a little bit of both. It feels like right now they're playing like an either or way, and I don't really like it. I think it just makes them look like they don't understand what they're doing. So it's I think you can't only play for lanes versus a team like Demon because I think Canyon is too smart, and so they'll go out in quarters if they try to just like only play for okay, well, we're holding a freeze, we're in a 2v2 with Set and Volibear, but Canyon is up like 100 CS, so I guess fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can get behind that. What do you think, Raz?
I think that they're decent they're good at being able to play both styles. And even though I think they're best when like Volibear set meta has been a thing for jungle. So they can play for Caps or Wonder, whatever it may be. I think that their issues for me haven't been, I mean, like Kelsey's made her point on that as well, but another thing, their issue hasn't really been what style they're playing, but the decisions that they're making within the game. Like their level ones is probably for me a great example that's constantly kept like Jankos behind has been pretty bad. One that I do remember, I think it was when they lost versus Team Liquid. I think level one, I think Nidalee and Ash are great level one. So like if someone's contesting you on that one, you should be able to poke them off objective and just like basically lead them around until they either commit to the buff and you have Nidalee, you can literally just like Q smite it, or they just have to peace out because they're getting chunked. And like the decision to kind of extend or like push in and then die and lose all that, like that, the level 1 in terms of when they decided to fight, Yanko specifically, was poor. And then when this one was worse actually, when G2 went up against Suning and Yankos got his raptor stolen or something, and then he decided when his mid laner was basing to then cross the river into the enemy raptors and then just like basically kill himself. These are just really weird decisions. Like these are just decisions that I feel like are fueled by emotion rather than actually like what's happening in the game. Um, so I think the comps are fine. They're all incredible. Like incredibly strong individual players in my opinion. Um, and they're smart players, they're veterans. So I think they can really work well with any comp that's given to them as long as they just can make calm, correct decisions.
Doubling down on Raz's point for just their decision making is for me has been real funky, especially looking at those last two Sunni games that they had. So like the first one that stood out to me was they tried to crash the wave with Caps on the Echo and then move him bot side, but they didn't have a big enough wave. So Angel just clears the wave, backs, TPs into the play bot side, and then Sunni end up turning that around. And in the very next game, they try and make a play towards Dragon again. They've no TP on Wonder Scion. He's miles back in base. You've got a GP in the top side is happening to just cannon barrage, and you've Sunni in a much better position. And again, G2 are trying to contest. So I think there's been a lot of unusual map decisions from them that I just wouldn't have expected from them coming into this tournament. And I'm hoping that they try and shore up in quarterfinals because otherwise they're just going to be decimated.
On the plus side for G2, I do think that their kind of almost IG-esque approach of constantly playing for multiple lanes is allowing them to keep tempo in situations even when they're losing. And so their map control is like really, really good. I think, but yeah, I do think that there are some weird decisions that they're applying to strange situations. Like in the first student game when their bot lane was losing, G2 have consistently done a play where they'll swap like bot to mid earlier, and then they'll send Caps bottom. But in that situation, I felt like it made zero sense because it was they had TF. But usually, if they have those situations, it's like Caps is on a champion that they feel like can outplay the 1v2. You're losing a ton of map pressure by moving TF bots, stuff like that. So it was just really strange.
So I'm going to put a pin in this conversation, but let's return to this a little bit later on when we talk about the quarterfinals, because I think there's more to delve into here, especially in their matchup. But let's talk Group B, and let's just blast through the groups quickly, and we'll keep the conversation a little bit lighter, and then we'll talk about our top teams in their quarterfinal matchups. So Group B, I mean, there's not that much to talk about in Group B, honestly, in my opinion, in that PSG and Rogue, I feel like, were kind of doomed from the start to an extent. JDG, though, winning out the second. I mean, honestly, it's a bit of a heartbreak for JDG, right? They win the second best of one once they get blue side. Like, everything looks fine and dandy. They look like they're contesting maybe the best team in the tournament based on what we had seen at that point. But they already lost to PSG. So they don't get the tiebreaker. They can't fight for first seed. It was a little bit like, JDG, this wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't how this group was meant to go. You were meant to fight for first seed here. I felt like that was just an unlucky game, if you will.
The draft against PSG just made me so sad because I just looked at them and went, if they fall behind at any point in time, they are absolutely fucked. And then they went and coin flips like the first 5 kills, and I was like, "What are you doing? Why is this a thing?" Yeah. And from that point on, like, fair dues to PSG, they played it incredibly well. But at the same time, I was just looking at it like, you've tossed the game away in the first 6 minutes, and you haven't got an opportunity to really come back into it. You've no engage tools. You've got a Kale that even if she gets the late game at this stage, the other team is just too strong. So yeah, they just didn't really give themselves many opportunities, and the one road that maybe looked like they could win through, they just closed it off straight away.
I mean, like, for me, looking at the draft, and I remember thinking this at the time, is more so like, what is Galio meant to do? Because if you have Graves, Kale, Galio, Ezreal, Karma, like Ezreal, Karma, like that's fine if you want to contest for lane. It may be difficult versus Kaelin. but like it made sense. Like the Graves and Kale pick, like if you're picking Kale versus Orin, then you're like, okay, well, I mean, it's very clear what you're trying to do with your comp. You're trying to play sides more frequently, and then like Ezreal Karma can just be strong like in their trio mid. So like as the game goes on, you can just have Ezreal Karma contest through mid and poke and push, and all of this made sense. But the Galio doesn't really have a purpose. And so like it's just gonna be really awkward for him. I don't necessarily need an ulting partner with Galio ever since like he, Nimbus Cloak exists and all that stuff, but they just didn't have constant wave clear if they wanted to play to sides. Was literally the only thing. So or they just didn't have like they didn't have the wave clear if they wanted to play the sides. They didn't have like an ability to play like a 1-3-1. Like how'd you feel about the comp actually, Kelsey? Because like for me, it felt I know Kale comps in general are pretty awkward, but
I think like they don't really have an opportunity to pick their fights, but I don't mind the Galio because I think you can play for like after a few initial waves, like Kale does kind of get prio. You can play for topside control, and then when Graves invades, like basically with the Galio or the TF, you're basically just looking to pick a fight somewhere, and then Galio will ult on tops of Graves. So Graves like going in was more the ult target. I think Graves is not too bad as an ult target here, just because Syndra's the only one who can feasibly kill him that easily if you have Galio ulti, but you do get kind of guided, so it's a bit unlucky. I think that if Ezreal Karma are able to get out of this lane normally, then they can kind of play it, but that Karma is still not like the best My problem was the Karma, honestly. Like, I feel like Karma is just not a good facilitator for 1-3-1. And since some of the Karma nerfs, if you're not getting an advantage in lane from her as support, then she's just really the most useless champion in the game. So
well,
for me, that was.
Oh yeah, you finish your point. I do this.
Yeah, so for me, that was like the weirdest thing is because you could have something that, I mean, was okay. They did ban Pantheon, but even going something like Nautilus Blind or whatever is more preferable. Or if you want to be really spicy, you can go like Pike or something. I don't know. I wouldn't pick Pike here, but you know what I mean. Just something with an engage tool. And if they go Kale and Lux, oh well, you're probably forfeiting that lane anyway. So it's whatever.
Right? Because like for me, the Karma pick, or at least what I valued in it, is literally just for the lane and maybe for like being able to kite in later fights, or like but if you're gonna have this struggle, then I wouldn't even pick Ezreal. Like Ashe is available. I remember at the moment actually just thinking, why not just pick Ashe? Or yeah, actually literally Ashe is just the most easiest one to contest the lane. You don't even have to pick Karma there. You can just pick some utility if you can pick her. Because you can just get 5-plated by Caitlyn Lux.
I do think maybe the thought process was we have Kales, we want something that has like some kind of carry potential, but yeah, you're gonna get.
It just feels bad because you're like any other lane matchup feels like you're just gonna get 5-plated if you go Ezreal into Caitlyn.
LPL has been really bad with like the disrespect Ezreal picks for most of the season, actually.
I was gonna say this is not a Worlds thing at all. This is just an LPL thing.
I mean, that's the reason why LGD is at Worlds, is the disrespect Ezreal pick, and IG not understanding that Kalista, how to play that Kalista matchup. So, yeah, fun times.
So, like realistically, let's be honest. I don't think that this group could have, aside from like positioning between first and second, I don't think this group was gonna end a different way with two different teams coming out of the group. I think it was a little bit doomed from the start, unfortunately, for Rogue and PSG. I would have put, JDG and Damwon in the top 3 teams at the entire tournament. I think honestly most people would. I don't think that's controversial. So in specifically the JDG versus Damwon matchup, then coming into quarterfinals, do you guys feel like they have Who do you think has performed better since they went 1-1 at the end of the day? If it went to a tiebreaker, can I get your guys' like opinions on how you think that would have gone down? I don't want to direct that at one person in particular because I don't want to put anyone on the spot specifically. But if someone has a
You're
take
saying
on
if
that.
the match actually meant
Yeah,
something?
so obviously they went 1-1.
Mhm.
If JDG hadn't been upset by PSG and there was a
Okay.
tiebreaker for first seed, how do you think that matchup actually pans out?
I mean, I think that would work out really well for Damwon. I think Damwon, their greatest strengths have always been getting topside, a huge advantage within the lane, and being able to kind of carve into the enemy jungle with that. Like Canyon will just play to Nuguri, and if Nuguri is basically pushing his opponent into turret, then you just don't own that side of the map. And I think that Canyon consistently will get an experience advantage through that. So I just think that. Oh yeah, and also just Damwon are just insane talented players. Like I know that people talk about Showmaker, Nuguri, and Canyon a lot, but Beryl has actually been performing really well this tournament as well. Like his Alistar flank, I forget which game it was that he had. I want to say this was actually versus JD.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it was actually the game we were talking about now.
yeah,
Or
where he got the Alistar flank, and it was just these kind of things that he's able to do, like pretty fucking creative. Um, and also just his roam timings are, it's he's just been talented or is like really smart for the past few 2 years because he was here last time, and I said basically the same things. So. I think he's a great support. I think this is a great team. I think they're also a lot more patient mid game, where JD at times, Blue Mao can feel pressure to force a fight when they don't
I mean,
necessarily have numbers.
you guys have seen the tweet, right, where it's like just the screenshots of the voice comms, and everyone talks about JDG being the smartest team, but it's just snapshots of Lumar saying like, "We should probably fight. I'm bored. Can we fight?" I feel like
it's like,
JDG
I'm
have
bored,
got
let's kill them. I think that's what
yeah,
it
and
is, yeah.
JDG have this reputation for being very slow. They're just slow in context of the LPL, not necessarily in context of League of
Yeah.
Legends.
Yeah, and like
Like I was
Blue Mao as
doing.
a player, you go.
Oh, I was just gonna have a fun aside, which was like I was doing a show with these fantasy people, and they were talking about how Huanfeng and Logan are just really good picks for fantasy, and it's like, what? Like compared to what? Like, and then it's like, oh right, it's LPL, of course. Even though we don't play to bot lane, these guys are gonna have way more kills than every other
Yep.
AD in the tournament. So yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I mean, what was I going to say? For JD, yeah, for Lu Mao. Lu Mao is an interesting one because I know a lot of the international fans will be watching him and talking about how you're right about the whole smartest team kind of thing and how he like a great captain in that respect. I agree with that. I think the one thing that he's definitely not a lot of the times is like patient, and he's oftentimes someone that will just fight because even if it's like it feels like it's a 60-40 play and you don't have complete information, he's just the type of person to honestly just want to fight. He reminds me more of an Ignar than I would say um, of like or of a barrel. So it's interesting that they've kind of gotten this reputation, and I mean it's obviously for good reason with how they played this split. But it's just I feel like it's a new thing that it's happened rather than a consistent throughout his career.
I wonder whether that's like a conscious choice from him, or whether that's like a feeling of things are too quiet right now. We got to do something. We gotta take control. We gotta force a fight. Kind of the MLXG meme of things are a slight advantage for us. We need to get a fight to get full control of the situation. Either way, let's conclude the. Oh, Dagda, did you want to add anything to the conversation?
I have the
Sorry.
opposite take, so I was gonna wait for Raz to finish.
Oh, sorry.
but-
Go on. Take it
But
away.
if Dagda has a different take, then I'll let him take it as well. If Dagda thinks JDG are better than Damwon, then I'll let him
Oh,
take it.
sorry. Yeah, I kind of think JD Gaming. I was kind of the same. I think I think their drafts have been a little bit funky, but definitely as the games have started to go on, I think Veteran made a really good point the last time he was on, which is like we're starting to see the same Damwon pop up all the time because Damwon treats scrims like they do the stage game, and I think teams are starting to figure them out a little bit. And I definitely think we saw that in JDG's game where they're able to figure out how they could play the early game. Obviously, as we started to move in towards the mid to late game, things started to fall apart a little bit for them. But certainly, I think within a series, I think JDG can pivot and maneuver a lot more so than I think Damwon could. So I think if we end up seeing them in a best of 5, I would give it to JDG. But with one more game, I think it's kind of a toss up as to which way it lands because Damwon are so good. But I definitely think over a best of 5 series, I think I'd give the edge to JDG.
So I think that it's interesting that Raz talks about taking random fights because I feel like Damwon they just fight everything. Like it's actually crazy. I think that in this actual matchup, JDG takes smarter fights than Damwon. So I was just like really confused, really interested that Raz had like the absolute opposite take. And I was wondering because it is an LPL team, right? If it's just like, okay, well, Korea's supposed to be smarter.
Yeah,
They usually are
so
smarter.
I just want to bounce off of that before I give it to Raz because I agree with you completely, Kelsey. At MSC, I literally said Damwon is the most LPL LCK team, and JDG are the most LCK LPL team. Right? It feels like they're both in almost the wrong regions. Not necessarily, but I agree with the sentiment entirely.
Like I think going into this tournament, I said JD and G2 are the only teams that I trust to consistently make trades in situations where the fight is not like as favorable, right? Whereas I think Damwon just draft to fight everything and actually fight everything. And I think we did see that in this game. Like it started with the top scuttle where Newbury was just like going full in for that fight. And then it was just after that, everyone was handshaking the fight, even though JD had that advantage. So, and then actually ended up having a better draft for a scaling team fighting team, and they didn't pressure the Calista matchup, etc. So, yeah, I mean, for me, I think that they're like JD are smarter about the fights they take. Like, I don't see other teams when they have a completely whack, awful draft use the fact that I'd be able to identify that they have a pick potential with their mid jungle as like Lisa and Galio. Recall, like, give up Herald, recall 2 minutes before the dragon, or 3 minutes, I think it was, like 3 minutes, just have full control of bot side vision, just keep that full control of bot side vision and sit there and wait for a pick because they know that's the only way they can get the goddamn dragon because their draft sucks. But they have the ability to get these picks. Like, I don't see teams do that, even though it's really obvious, but I see JDG do that. So for me, I don't agree that Damwon are going to be more random and take more random fights. So
Well, I mean,
don't know.
the point that I made was more so like in comparison not to Damwon, but was in comparison to the fans' expectation of JDG, right? Like the fan expectation of JDG is that they are the smartest team, like just flat out. Um, and like Lu Mao's reputation being built in as like I wouldn't say as a calm player, but like as a very cerebral player, where it literally feels like he's a person that just wants to fight, and kind of comparing him to Ignar. Funny enough, I mean I completely agree on the sentiment about Damwon. If I'm giving it to Damwon over JDG, it's not for like quote unquote being the smarter team. I just think they're better players. Like they just literally have the better top lane individually, the better mid lane individually, the better.
But you think
I think it's
Niguri is
pretty
better than
Zoom, yeah, individual, and
really?
like for me, yeah, I
Really?
think,
Huh.
That's
yep,
controversial in an LPL show, Raz. I'm not gonna lie.
I think
No, I mean,
my because they first of all, I think kind of just setting the stage for it, like they're completely different players in how
For
they
sure.
want to play lane. Because Zoom is the type of player that actually would play more um, facilitating picks like Ornn, and I know he didn't do this for this tournament. This tournament he conformed more to like the Camille's and all of that, like the actual carry tops. But for me, he's always been someone who plays a facilitating role. He will still get resources, um, but then he would like be more of a strong team fighting top laner, and that's how I viewed him, and that's how I kind of watched him. But for me, Nuguri is currently I would see as the best top laner. toe to toe with 369 in the world. Like just how like individually rather than like I'm just based off success. So I don't know what you'd view it as. I'm actually interested in how you see it.
So I think if you really like the top laners who play like almost really for 2v2s, like maybe Ben's like this where he plays really aggro, like the Shy is like this where he plays really aggro. It was actually really funny to hear the Shy's criticism of Nuguri last year because he does
He
the
literally
exact
did
same
the
shit.
Yep.
But I think like if you like those types of players, then yeah, Nuguri is pretty good. Like his coordination with his jungle is really strong. I think that in the context of LPL, Kanavi gets a lot of hype because JDG play better for jungle than most teams. I don't actually think LPL plays like people are saying Eastern meta versus Western meta. It's like no, LPL doesn't really play for jungle that much. But I think that he kind of gets overrated in that context. But at the same time, like they don't really play through their lanes, so it's just kind of weird. They're such a weird team. But if you watch, like Zoom gets like incremental advantages in situations where he basically understands that it's 1v2. Like his wave manage is really, really good. And if he gets a gigantic timer, he's not going to stay and like push the next tower. He's not going to look and fight for topside jungle. Probably he's going to use his timer to go bottom, fuck shit up, go mid, fuck shit up. Like basically, if Zoom gets a lead, his understanding of the map and the way he can get an advantage is so much better, I think, than anyone else at the tournament. So I actually think Zoom is crazy because like he gets incremental advantages in his lane. If you actually watch the way he plays Survive Side, it's pretty nuts.
You know what's hilarious is that
the trade windows that he takes. So like I think he's not as flashy as like Nuguri and 369 because they're not going to play for top the same way that other teams will. But if you, like it's almost like crack for people who are top lane and like the 1v1 because it's like he really understands like how the enemy jungle is pathing and how to play his wave as a result, which like is not expected of an LPL top laner. So I think Zoom is really, really good.
Zoom is top lane crack. That's a headline I can get behind.
I literally, by the way you had framed Zoom is just how your team plays. I'm just putting this out there, just so you know. It's like just
so
like
literally fake God. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
No, like in the mindset of like, all right, I have a small TP bot, and it's like, but like I think different mentality of how you want to be able to get leads and use your leads. What I love about Nuguri is that yeah, he is very selfish with how he gets it. Even when he plays Lulu, he's doing it literally for the matchup to squeeze as much of a lead as he can, harass under turret as much as he can, and like, yeah, support his jungler and be very mindful of where his jungler is and aid him. But of course, to try and come out of lane with as huge of a lead so he can be helpful. So like, this is something that I think is like super consistent with them. I still think they're like Zoom and Nuguri are just like kind of very different players where I would say Nuguri, Ben, you already mentioned like the Shy, 369 to a certain degree. Like these are all players that I think are very like-minded. So it's like easier to compare these players than it would be with like, yeah, with someone like Zoom. Trying to think about another top laner in the LPL that can, or like as in like one of the best top laners in the LPL that kind of fits that. Actually, who would you guys even? What would you put? The first top laner that came to mind is definitely. It feels like an insult because I was about to say Mouse. So.
Yeah, I think it's so hard to do what Zoom does. Like it's so hard to be Survive Side carry. Like it's. And then the fact that we have been seeing him more recently get jungle pressure, right, and be able to carry the games from that position.
Yeah. Get them that. Get
and
the
then
delivery,
dogs.
man.
And then dogs.
I didn't even know she had a dog. That's the best thing about it.
Yeah.
She just can't talk because something's happening. But I'm just gonna say, like,
I'm talking about Zoom, and the dog starts barking. You know, dog.
Even he's excited about it.
Dog chant.
Very true.
Play Orn. Just any dog chant as possible.
Play Orn. Exactly. His Camille was Camille renekton our
She's not allowed. She's not allowed to talk. By the way, she has a point. It's just not allowed to happen.
Yeah.
This is the
People
perfect
are
time to start insulting.
are
Okay, go on.
People are answering the door for a door-to-door salesman. I don't know, man. Life is weird. Let's go.
You need to have one of those little stickers in your window. That's the only way. I don't know about
Or you
America,
can
but if there's a
just look
sticker in
out
the
the
window,
window.
it's illegal to knock in the UK.
Oh, what the heck?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
We don't mess about. I don't know if that law is enforced, but it is a law. Yeah, finish your point, Kelsey, and then we're already getting towards the hour mark, so we got to start to speed things up.
Yeah,
a
I
little
don't
bit.
really have much else to say. It's just like I really just think it's hard to do what Zoom does, like to not get jungle pressure and carry from survive side, and then just like understand wave management that well, and also just be able to mechanically play like Camille Renekton as well as he does.
I think that's
Yeah,
the key thing. Is it's like the full package, right? He's such a great tank weak side top laner if he needs to be. He's also an incredibly great carry top laner. Like there are, in my mind, like usually two categories of top laners, and that grouping doesn't cross super well in a lot of situations.
Yeah, I was struggling to figure out a top laner that kind of fits his mentality in the LPL. I think Long Xing's pretty damn close actually. I would
Maybe
definitely put
Shabai.
Long Xing. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the thing as
He's
well is
a poor man Zoom.
yeah.
Poor Blanchard.
I think the thing as well is that like whether he's on an Ornn or a Volibear or the Camille, like his engages are next to none. Like he's the best engaged top laner that is at Worlds at the moment. Where even we saw it in the Damwon game, he's on the Camille and he still manages to get that 3-man hook shot, wall shot into the lot of them. And then we work so well with Lumeo. I think honestly, Lumeo's been getting a lot of the priority picks that allow him to do what he wants to do in this World Championship, where he's getting like the Bard, the Pantheon, the Set, these big playmaking supports that have given the opportunity to work with Zoom and get these engages. I'm curious to see if Lumeo actually does get target banned alongside, like, and they take away a lot of those big engage tools. Are you able, as JDG, to just rely solely on Zoom? Because if you're going back towards the Camille's and the style that they're playing at the moment, I feel like that's the way you attack JDG in a draft, is actually not so much looking at Loken or Yagao or even Kanavi. I think it is getting rid of Lumeo and these long range engage supports, because their ability to just find these picks and set up fights that are so favorable for them is what are winning JDG these games.
I would kind of. It's interesting because I think what JDG have done poorly during groups, or at least like have been kind of, I guess exposed in, is that if Kanavi doesn't have a strong start in his games, like if he gets put behind, and I think honestly this is the case for every team, but I think it's especially important for JD, because they tend to play around Kanavi and want him to get an advantage early on. Is that level ones obviously have been kind of fucking him, and if teams kind of tunnel him into a decision-making tree where it's like, well, the only way you can actually get proper experience is if you go bot side, and then even then, like basically if he gets fucked in the early level, they don't really have someone that can bail them out. Like a lot of the times, they're not necessarily the best laners across the board, and so if you can get JD going into mid game on deficits just through either the picks that they've had in lanes, and Kanavi's being targeted, then I think like that's been a real struggle point for JD. So yeah.
I would have fully agreed with you. There's one game where they played against BLG in the regular split where Kanavi got completely screwed in the early game, and then they were able to come back. Now it's BLG, so obviously take that with a pinch of
Yep,
salt.
they're a shit team
Yeah,
right now.
exactly. So that's the thing. It's just
Meteor's
like,
pretty
So
good.
this one game with BLG, like okay,
Yeah,
I'm already tuning out, man.
I still like.
One game BLG.
Yeah, my point is,
So hear me
I
out,
still think-
Vici.
yeah. But I still think there are moments where we can see the JDG can still play back and still rely on Zoom and Lumeo to set them up. But I certainly don't think they're more detrimental to falling behind as a jungler than any other team. I think they can still rely on Zoom and Lumeo in these team fights. But obviously Kanavi is pretty instrumental, but I definitely think it isn't as big of an issue. I think Lumeo and his impact is a little bit higher, especially since we've seen like even when Kanavi takes picks like the Silas and he does fall behind, they're still able to find these opportunities to get picks and wins.
All right. Well, I'm gonna put a pin in this one, and I'm gonna move on because we've done 2 groups. We've not even thought about quarterfinals yet, and we're at the hour mark. Are either of you guys the guests on a tight schedule here? Do you have other things coming up very shortly? Do I need to just like blast through at this point, or are we good to still cruise
Yeah, that
on?
couch, I might just sleep on it at some.
No.
Absolutely, I have no
Okay.
other obligation.
I
Last
still
week we were
have
on quite a
3/4
tight.
of this bottle, so I'm
Okay,
good,
sweet.
you know?
I don't
Yeah.
want to like rush the conversation if everyone's cool to just converse, but if
I have
someone's
more to
got
drink now that the ice is melted, so I'll take that as a
nice, that's always that weak watered down coffee is always what you buy it for at the end of the day.
Exactly.
All right, Group C. Let's talk because this one, I mean, TSM aside, does anyone want to say anything
TSM
about
aside.
TSM before we move on? Because I kind of want to talk about the teams that are going to move on in the tournament, but
They didn't discover the magic of level 1s, therefore they were fucked. The
There we
end.
go.
I feel like there was more
Yeah.
to it than that, though. I feel like
The
there
only
were
thing-
more issues than just level 1.
Oh,
the
okay,
thing-
I can talk about the most ridiculous thing I saw TSM do the entire
Oh,
tournament. Okay?
I love this. Let's go. 'Cause
All right.
there have been a lot of them.
There have been a lot, but for me, the most mind-blowing thing was in the second TSM Gen G game. Not the okay. Everyone's immediately thinking of the Lilia thing. No. This is way before that. Gerson has like a huge advantage, right? He's 2 kills up. He knows that he should be freezing and denying BDD at this point, right? So he's Lucian, and he has a good freeze, right? Okay, like wait manage, check mark.
Check.
But he's standing like under his turret, like just so he can barely last hit the creeps in the freeze. And BDD is doing the same thing. He's standing up and he's just using his Q to last hit the creeps in the freeze. So neither of them are breaking the freeze. But I'm just like Gerson. If I'm coaching Gerson after this game, I'm sitting him down. I'm just like, Gerson, do you know why we freeze?
Yeah, it's like what is the point? What is the
What's
point
the
to
point
freeze
of
at this point?
freezing? Do you know what we can get out of it?
Hit
Because
this man.
this is not it, man. This is just. I was just like, what the fuck?
Look,
am I
I just want the minions near my wave because I like being close to home. I get a little bit homesick if I get too far up the lane. So let's
I
just
can-
let's
I
just
can
both
stand
equally
under
farm
the
here,
turret.
okay?
I can stand under the turret and feel safe, man. Like
I think
Lucian with 2 kills.
I think for me, the one thing I hated about watching TSM play was like the lack of confidence in certain instances. Like obviously everyone will also remember the level 1 where Alistar just had flash pulves and you're like, well, I'm pretty sure you knew you were gonna get invaded on. So like, where was the surprise and why did we need it to flash pulve? Like that one was a weird one from Biofrost. But then there was like, I think when they were already out of contention, where they go for a Baron play. Who was this versus actually? This was when they already had a lead. They were doing really well in this game. Man, everything just feels like a blur to me.
Yeah,
Um,
there's been a lot of League of Legends.
A lot.
But TSM was doing really well in this game. They forced for a Baron fight. And at this point, like, I'm just watching Spica just fall to like 10% HP on Lilia. He's just so damn low on this it wasn't on this Baron run. Like they're just pushing for it. They can leave whenever they want. They're the ones forcing the play. And like the moment I see Spica just smite for help,
Oh,
I
when
was
he
like,
early smites. Oh my god.
no, but it's not even an early smite. I was like, you can't do this. Like you literally can't do this. Like what?
Yeah.
Who?
It was
is
at like
making the
4,000
call?
health or something. He's just doing it literally.
But the point that I'm
literally
making is
swag
like
out.
you cannot do Baron at this point. Like you need one person on this team to make the call. Usually it would be the jungler, by the way. It's like that. It's like we're doing this. Are we focusing on the objective? Are we backing away? What's the plan, right? And it felt like they were just not confident because they were doing everything except for what was like the intended idea. If this man is literally hidden Baron, the rest of the team should be doing that, or at least like helping him, like so he just doesn't
Yeah.
perish on the objective alone. And also, I'm pretty sure the right play is to just say screw it. Our jungler is way too fucking low. We can't do this, and so they should just all back away from the play. But it felt like they were just in this middle ground where I feel like a more confident player or whoever's communicating in this play, more confident team, would just make it very clear, and they would just be backing the fuck away. So like, I think nervousness or whatever it may be had a huge play because it felt like they were just making weird decisions. But like that was a few takeaways that I had from just watching their games. Moments that are just wild to watch.
How much do you guys think that it was like the pressure on being TSM, being the NA first seed, and not performing in the first week was like, because that was a second week play, and that I agree that was a play like based on lack of confidence, right? How much of that do you think is like in their heads thinking, if I fuck this up, I'm gonna be memed for the next 12 months of my life?
Well, I don't know. My thing is it's impossible to say the motivation or like even like if this person was nervous and if it was just them playing poorly, right? You can never really know a reasoning for someone underperforming it. So like me, I would never psychoanalyze like that, but I do think that um that the mistake that I had made like mentioned was like on the second round robin. So for sure, in a lot of people's mind, if you have already fallen behind 0-3, there's a lot of expectation, there's a lot of pressure. People who read social media, there's that aspect of it. So like I'm sure that there was some of it that was based off that. And I mean, they just had new players too on the stage. At least on like an international stage, like Broken Blade on an international, Speak on an international, and I feel like those two players are where they kind of based a lot of their plays around in playoffs. Like they play towards top side. It's pretty like that is like the backbone of their game. So it makes a lot of sense that like if things go wrong in that respect, that
That the
that like
rest
you
of the
just don't have
platform's
the
apart, yeah.
experience. Yeah, exactly.
I think it's really people call what NA does a stylistic choice, right? Which is to scale for late and fight.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not a stylistic choice. It's just not min-maxing, right? It's just not understanding
What you can get out of
the
it.
trades in your lane matchup or the win conditions of your champions. Like that's like such a weird thing, but it's I know like LS was tweeting about it yesterday, and the DRX matchup was just like he was like losing his mind about DRX like not fundamentally understanding how their composition plays against enemy comp. But it's like for NA, I think at some point it starts at a much more basic level, which is the interactions between like the champions at the very beginning of the game, right? And then going on, and then that if you don't understand those, it's really hard to understand compositionally how they feed into each other, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, because if you talk to a lot of these players, I'm sure they'll be able to tell you what their champ wants to do. But practicing executing it, understanding how to execute it, I think, is hard, right? Especially because they don't necessarily get the most matchup practice in solo queue, right? And then if they're limit testing like psychopaths and scrims, they're probably being told that they're ruining the game for the rest of the map, you know? So it's one of those things.
On top of that as well, it's like even if you know your goals as a champion throughout the game, like your goals as a champion change depending on the composition that you're playing as well. And if you, especially coming into Worlds, when I think a lot of teams have had to kind of change their styles a little bit, that becomes even more difficult to expand that understanding.
But I just think there's just like it's definitely that, but then when you're confronted by how little you know compared to the teams you're scrimming against, it's easy to look like you know even less because you lose confidence in what you already do understand, right? You lose confidence in what you already know you can execute because it's not working in scrims. And so then you just look like you don't know anything, which I think was a big TSM problem for sure. Like all of those factors compounded, which is like, okay, holy shit, we're behind. What do we do? And I think that's a really easy lens to apply, which is like, I've seen a lot of players who will advance from one level to the next, like go from Under to Academy, solo queue to Academy, Academy to LCS, and then be just confronted by, oh my gosh, there's such a gap between these levels. Everything I thought I understood about the game is wrong. I don't want to make any plays. And I can imagine going from LCS to the world stage is really similar in that regard. So
Yeah, I think for me, I think the mentality a lot of the times is not necessarily that they don't know what their comp does, because I think that's something that the community will say a lot of the times. Because I'm sure that the players they go in, they recognize what their champions do, what the comp is intending to do, um, and like so it's very clear what their goals are. But the problem that I see so many times is like they just don't. It's either that they're super risk averse, and it's basically what you're saying in min maxing that they really only draw the lines of like we're gonna fight for this dragon, we're gonna fight for this herald, we're gonna like there are so few objectives that they're willing to fight for or really claim. Where if I'm watching like the best LPL team or the best LCK team, that you're always getting more. That there are
Yeah.
that Raptors is an objective, red buff spawn is an objective, that
Yeah.
Vision
Every
is
little
one is
minion is
another
an
thing.
objective. Yeah.
Like it's like where like for instance like basically if you're placing a line in defensive vision, like people if someone actually crosses that line that you're willing to fight for it. Where in a lot of the games that I've seen from LCS, it's like they don't want to throw a game at that fight. If the person crosses that line and clears their ward, they're just gonna let them clear that ward, because they will think they'll look up and say, well, dragon's coming in, a minute's time or a minute's 30's time. That's the objective that we want to fight for. We don't want to fuck up when we get to that point.
On that
That's
min
one
max,
thing that I kind of like. That's one thing that I really dislike is that they kind of only fight for one objective, and even then, they don't team fight optimally,
Mhm.
and they're going up against like teams that literally have skirmished consistently
I mean,
yeah.
if
That's
you
pretty
aren't
much my
going
point.
for it and don't understand the power of like these small things and you haven't tried, then it's really easy to not know how to team fight too, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when you're against teams that team fight for everything, right?
Yeah.
I do
I
just
think
want to let Dagda talk because I feel like he's been holding a
yeah,
point
go
for a
for
little
it.
while.
Sorry.
I just wanted to double down on the points both you made with the min maxing. Was Mark Z actually had a really good video that he broke down on it, which was
Yeah.
like TSM going for this bot lane dive, and they managed to get what there's like 5 of them diving onto 3 members underneath the bot lane
Yeah, I saw
turret,
this.
and they end up going underneath the turret and they get a kill. But it's easy for Broken Blade to back away, tank turret, and they can pick up every single person in that trade. But Spica is the only one that actually goes aggressive in the play, and
Mhm.
everyone else from TSM backs off. And it really does showcase that point of the min maxing is like, well, the play is to go for this bot lane dive. Oh, cool, we got 1 kill. We're gonna back away. We're gonna be happy with that. Whereas other teams and other regions will look at that go, no, we can pick up everything versus just, hey, look, that one successful play, or we got that one successful kill. And I think that's the big difference when I look at them is that like they can read what they're supposed to do, but it's not the, hey, this is exactly how much we can pick up here, and kind of bouncing off of both your points, one, the min maxing, but also not wanting to throw the game away in that singular play. They're not willing to just push the envelope that little bit more, which could knock the game in their win, but they just don't want to take that last step.
I think the phrase
And
he
I think
used is they don't have the killer instinct
killer
that other
instinct, yeah.
regions have. Yeah.
I think it's like kind of a circular thing though, right? Because it's like I think you develop killer instinct by having confidence in your champ, right? And how your champ
Yep.
plays.
Yeah.
So if you don't know that or you don't feel that, then you're not gonna have killer instinct, right? But if you don't have killer instinct, you're probably not gonna limit test to get that as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a
It's a
weird
vicious
situation.
cycle.
I do think we see this a lot because, like, obviously, NA has always been the LCK copy region or whatever. So you see this a lot from like LCK veterans as well. But they have had the cycle of newer players who are willing to try a bunch of different other things that we haven't had as much, right? So that's like a whole other can of worms that I don't want to get into.
So I'm going to move the conversation away a little bit from NA as a region, and I want to move on to the rest of Group C that actually got wins. So Genji first seed, Fnatic second seed, LGD third seed. I'm not going to lie, guys. After play-ins, I'm amazed that LGD got 3 wins. Like, this is maybe the most inconsistent team in the history of Worlds. That's obviously not true. That's a very ridiculous statement. But like, how can a team like LGD have games in play-ins that were just so appalling versus some of the games that they played in this group actually looked really exceptional, like an actual one of the best teams in the tournament kind of level. Like, it feels like the difference between their bad games and their good games is incredibly dramatic.
Is it though, really? Because I'm thinking about the Gen G LGD game from the last day, and I'm thinking about that the double flash after the Volibear, and that's it. That reminds me so much of when he was playing against Rainbow Seven, right? And he goes for the top dive and dies, and then Jose Ododa just takes his entire top side.
So
I'm just
There we
like,
go.
all right.
hang on. So what you're saying is like every single game they're just like rolling a d20, and it's just like whether the play works out. That's the difference.
Sure.
That's the inconsistency.
I mean,
I think
I knew going into plans even that this team was going to be basically just like, Sia, it can carry the game or not. That would be the team. And that would be the game. They're basically
Yeah, I
like,
agree.
in a weird sense, like TSM light, you know?
I guess, yeah.
So,
And how hard can Peanut?
or not, or are TSM LGD led? I don't know, man. But like, because
Peanut was a
TSM got
lot
pretty
better than
destroyed
play-ins. Peanut
by
was a lot
them.
better than he was.
Either way, I knew that was gonna happen. So I was kind of whatever on them.
I'm more surprised that
think
they got 3 wins than I
there's-
am than that they got 3
I think
losses.
that there's a history of teams that suck in play-ins performing like pretty well. I think in general, this is probably the worst showing from a team. I guess like Clutch went 0-6. But in terms of like play-in teams in general, I think that this is like one of the worst showings from a play-in team. Or in terms of play-in teams in general this year, because none of them got out of groups. Like none of them got out of groups. Whereas historically,
Rude.
like you've had Cloud9 get out of groups, you've had EDG get out of groups after like
Yeah.
losing into Infinite Esports.
Nice. Team WE
You've
do basically the same thing.
Yeah, you've had Cloud9
Okay.
go 5 games versus Gambit and destroy Genji and Vitality or whatever, and
Yeah.
then have like a 5-game series against WE. So I think it happens, you know, like it's just or not W. No. That was the year that they beat Longdrew. Was it? Yeah, it was. They had a 5-game series in play-ins to get out of the group, and then they 3-0'd Longdrew in quarterfinals and mid-semis. So
Yeah.
for sure, like there have been teams that like figure their shit out in play-ins and then do well. So I don't think LGD was that weird to get 3 wins based on that.
Fair enough.
Yeah. My thing on LGD was that I think Peanut is a bit of a coin flip player, just a little bit. I think he's talented. I think his Kindra's great. I think he's really greedy. Like that death that he had to like that dive topside. I think that's what you literally mentioned. So,
Yeah.
yeah, he's the type of person that he'll for sure like lose a game for his team because they play through him. They'll just funnel resources to him. They'll play and get him, scuttle prio or kindred marks. So like he will either play really well or play insanely poorly. But Xie is the most consistent player. And Longxing, man, Longxing I think played, if I'm remembering this correctly, I think Longxing, yeah, he actually is hilariously good. When his jungler got destroyed topside, and then Longxing was still able to actually play out team fights insanely well on the Renekton. He's somebody that I think is really consistent, strong under those circumstances. So they do have talented players. Like that is the case. A lot of their team play and actual focus on objectives is really hard to watch. And to the point that you actually made, like the question that you asked, Munch. I think in play-ins, they really underestimated their opponent. There are many times where I felt like they greeted for waves when objective was coming up, and it was just happening consistently. And I was like, this is the most basic shit. Like their Drake is coming up. Get your ass to mid lane.
Have you not hit
Push
tab in a
out,
while?
like control it, like, but they would just
Get your
miss
ass
these
to mid lane.
windows.
The most commonly said phrase in NA.
Four people move up mid, please, everybody. But like they would just be late for these objectives versus literal playing teams, and I don't want to just like badmouth. They're really bad teams, and I just don't understand how this was a thing they would constantly do. So I underrated them. Like I just thought that after watching that, I was like, guys, this is. I don't care how, like. I thought they would go last after their plans performance because they were kind of messing up the most consistent play that you can make in League of Legends, which is the dragon setup. And then I guess I don't know. I guess that they were just better players. That's it, versus TSM.
It's
And
not
they
that
honestly
surprising.
they took those games into more consideration. Also, I just thought they played more team fighting, like that. They moved away, pretty sure, away from like 1-3-1. They disowned that shit after they lost to Rainbow Seven on that. So they just played a lot more consistently around playing for and focusing around major objective team fights, and I thought that did a lot better for them.
That's how they'd succeeded in the LPL, so I can totally get behind that.
True, very
I
true.
think the big difference for them now, though, was I think Mark really stepped up. Like to put a little bit of at least polish the shit a little bit. I think Mark really did look a lot better. I know, but Mark
It's still
looked
a
lot better
turd, but it's polished.
Yeah. He really impressed me. I think him being able to get out of lane and actually have an impact in the early stages of the game, but also his ability to have these big impact moments in team fights, which is what was really lacking in the summer split, where he would either miss abilities or be in the wrong position or not quite be able to even have the confidence to get fights started. I was just from that point of view impressed by the growth we saw from Mark, especially coming onto the world stage. Like this was his first time going to Worlds. I didn't have the highest expectations from him, especially as Raz was saying after playing. So just to give a little bit of credit there, I think Mark really did step up.
So I do want to move the conversation on a little bit here because OGD didn't make it out. I want to talk Genji and I want to talk Fnatic. I'm not going to lie, I'm bursting for the bathroom. So I'm going to kick the conversation off here. I'm going to nip to the loo. But let's talk Genji, let's talk Fnatic here. Because I feel like while they're both making it out of the group, they're stylistically quite dramatically different teams. And I have to say, Fnatic especially, coming out from what we saw from them in the LEC versus the team we're seeing at Worlds, it actually feels like a pretty dramatically different team, like the way that they're playing. And I feel like Fnatic is playing a much more aggressive style of game than what we saw from them in the LEC.
You go on this one because like I wouldn't actually. Yeah, I'm interested in what your take is, Kelsey.
Okay, so I think Genji and Fnatic are another example of the idea that the East-West jungle read on the meta is like different, or
Yeah.
because I feel like I always think of Fnatic in my head as JDG light. They don't have lanes that they really play through, and Selfmade has to basically carry the game. I think like the primary difference between the JDG Fnatic and Fnatic discussion is their bot lane is pretty good.
Yeah.
And their top lane is okay. You know.
Yeah.
No flame on Bippo. I felt like the top lane pool in this group was not insane, which is part of the reason why you also saw Long Xing look really good. By the way, if anyone wants to know the mystery between LPL Renekton's and other Renektons, they say flash for dragon fights. It's crazy. I know.
Incredible.
Insane. But anyway, I think that's like one of the big things for me is just that they're basically like slightly more bot focused, but they play a lot like JDG. Or they try to, in terms of getting self-made ahead. And then Genji, I think, are very, very bot focused generally, which is why it was weird to watch them in play-ins. Just I think that their play like Ezreal and stuff or group stage play like Ezreal and stuff. It just felt really strange. For example, I've consistently seen. I know that you guys talked about it on the last episode where you thought it was weird. I think one of the guests thought it was weird that BDD gave up waves and with bot, but I've seen him do that in LCK so much You know, just like I have to help my bot lane guys. You know, I'm gonna dip here, and you can have. I'm hard winning mid lane, and I've denied this guy like 3 waves of CS, but I'm gonna go give him back 2 to go bot and help these guys. So, I've seen that so much, and it's really interesting to see them play like that. I also think Clit is like very focused on bot lane.
Yeah.
So for me, like Genji's win condition is don't do the Ezreal disrespect, right? Pick like a good counter pick bot matchup. Play really aggressively. Whereas Fnatic is weird because they're Fnatic or they're JDG lights, but they don't play as big of an expansive a pool as the carry junglers. Like I lost my mind watching LEC final when enemy team picks Shen and they respond with Gragas. It's like, yeah, this is definitely they save last pick for Gragas even. This is definitely a champion you're gonna completely out farm on, right? Like you're gonna carry the game through this Gragas. So
Yeah, actually, I don't understand their. Yeah, you finish your point first. I agree with it.
So Fnatic's like a really weird team where it's you can see the way forward for them to play, but they're really hit or miss on it. And they have, I think, mid lane a big mid lane weakness, which a lot of people have harped on, so I won't. Top lane is depends on what kind of crazy counterpick Whippo has, you know, and bot is pretty good. I think Hillsong is Boomer, but really understands how to impact the map, like Boomer mechanics, but really understands how to impact the map really hard. So that's a big advantage they have. I think versus, like we'll talk about this later, but versus their quarterfinal matchup, their best advantage is using support jungle and trying to carry with that. Because they are going to play, I forget who they're playing, but that was my assessment at the time.
I think it's
They're against
Shady.
TES,
Oh, it's top, is it?
TES.
Oh god.
Yeah, I felt like their lanes are like really doomed, but they can try maybe to support jungle carry because I feel like TES support jungle's energy is not as great.
We'll return to the quarterfinal conversation anyway. Raz, do you want to bounce?
So let's see, which one did I want to kind of hit on that I agreed with? I'll just touch on on Fnatic a little bit more. So like Fnatic, I think they had a really weird group because I agree they play through jungle. That's how they win their game. Self-made is incredibly strong. Oh yeah, the point that I wanted to bounce off, which is like the jungle pool. Like they're a team that just doesn't play Nidalee, which I'm really surprised about because it should just fit really well in their in how they want to play the game. And she's such a high-pro jungle that I was really shocked that that's just not something that Fnatic is willing to play. Because I don't want to say that Selfmade can't play that shit. Because I'm pretty sure anyone you could definitely play Nidalee. So this is more so them not
challenger and A players not know Nidalee cancels with like 200 plus games played on that job. So but anyway, keep going.
Hey man. But yeah, like I was really surprised by it, and I think even if you're not the best Nidalee player, like we've seen Clear Love Nidalee, like it's just if she's in the meta, you have to play her. So I think that's something that will.
She wasn't even in the meta when he played her. Whatever.
That's true.
But I will defend Clear Love until the day I die. That's all I have to say.
Except for that Nidalee play. But yeah, it's really shocking for me. But that being said, like for sure, strong jungle that they can play to. I think that they've had strong side lanes too in that group, and I think one thing that I think will be a big change when they go up against top esports is the fact that they've been getting a lot of just stomping bot lane games. Versus Genji when life went no flash versus Leona. First of all, like Rakan versus Leona is pretty tough for Rakan to make a play in the matchup. I'm pretty sure, at least for the laning phase. It's actually just I know it's been recently a debated topic because of tenacity, but like it's hard lane for Rakan to actually do something in that lane. But then now you're not even gonna take a huh?
Pre-mercs,
yeah. Now you're not gonna take flash in the matchup. It's one thing that I just did not understand from life, and I think Fnatic did a great job to just punish his ass. Like they just went down bot side, even brought in Selfmade on dives, and just made it really difficult for that lane to actually do anything, because it was also an Ezreal lane as well. So they were just doomed in that game. And then I forgot who else they went up against, but like they really punished a level 1 with Ashe and just got a huge advantage with that one as well. So it's not to say that they Hillsong and Reckless are not playing really well. I think they are playing really well, but it's just not going to be the same case when they go up against Jackie Love and Yuyanja. They need to for sure rely on jungle, and if they're going to do that, then Nemesis and Whippo has to play well. Like they need to be able to have their solo lanes perform well and support Self-Made on his pick. I know you don't want to talk about the actual quarterfinals, but just kind of like as a main takeaway from me in groups was that I just don't think a lot of what Fnatic was able to do in this group will translate. And I think that this, from watching this group, I actually think this group was weak.
Yeah, I
That
think
I
so
agree.
too.
yeah. So this
I think it
was
was
a weak group, and
competitive, but because there wasn't as
My
Exactly.
my assessment going into this group was I put teams in an order that I thought like seemed plausible without thinking about it too much, because I didn't think any of these guys were contenders past like quarters.
yeah, I agree with that.
So, but then I ended up getting it right. So,
There we go.
apparently not caring is the secret to getting correct pick'ems. So,
Yeah.
So, Dagda, did you want to say anything on Fnatic, or should we talk Genji?
I agree with the guys. I think I know Raz, it was the LGD game you're talking about, that Ash one, where they end up getting that early kill
Yep.
just off of
Yep.
Mark going in, where he goes in for some strange reason. But yeah, I think they kind of rely on those early game chaos where they can get ahead, and specifically with Hilisan being able to pull it out and play the map super well is where Fnatic are able to shine. But I think as they start to go up against top esports who should be able to keep them under control a lot better, I think just then individually they can't match up against them, and that's really where they're going to start to fall behind.
we'll talk about this more later. But yeah, well, all right, so
Okay,
I have
we'll
some- I have
revisit.
thoughts.
We'll revisit. So Genji then, final team from Group C. I feel like Genji just kind of played like Genji from the regular split majoritively. I don't feel like Genji showed much different than what we've already seen from them in the past. I think that they are an incredibly strong late game team fighting team. And correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like Kelsey's nodding a little bit. Raz is looking a little bit skeptical. But to me, at least, it was like, okay, if BDD and Ruler look exceptional during the team fights, great, we're on a good one. If not, then it's not going to look fantastic. If the other team can get ahead of us early and outpace us, Genji are going to struggle. That was my read on it coming out of the group.
Yeah, I just thought they were playing towards top side a little bit more frequently than I expected, that I've seen from them in regular season.
Mhm.
So Rascal was getting a lot more resources and treatment, like, and the ability to kind of play his lane out. And
I think
Ruler
he lived up
was
to that as well. I think he did better
Yeah.
than he has previously.
Yeah, for sure. But I also just think that the competition within that group wasn't strong as well. So I do think that he was playing well. It's just something that I've realized that, and I said this on broadcast, which was um, they kind of showed that they can play through multiple lanes, that they have BDD and Clid can play to top side. But when it comes to pressure moments, I want them to play towards Ruler, because I think their bot lane is their is their strength. Like that is how they win games, is through their AD difference. But yeah, I think they're just trying to be more flexible, which can harm them.
Ruler gives them life.
Oh my God! Stop! Stop! Stop!
I can appreciate a good
I had
pun,
to.
but
I
yeah.
had to.
Oh dear. All right. Well, I don't think Genji's that interesting to talk about, to be honest. So I'm just going to move on to Group D, if that's all right with everyone.
Mhm.
So Group D, obviously Top Esports manages to finish first seed, Dragon X in second seed, FlyQuest going 3-3, tying up with Team Liquid in the end. And unfortunately, Unicorns of Love 0 and 6. I was really hyped on Unicorns of Love after play-ins. I was really excited for them, and then they completely got destroyed in the group.
I
Was-
actually don't even remember. I thought they at least got a game. Actually, I
No,
forgot the game.
0-6. Because I predicted them like twice, maybe 3 times.
watched
I
that
thought they
game.
were going to
Yeah.
upset, and it just did not
I
happen.
thought they, yeah, that's fair. I figured that they could get a game,
Yeah.
but I was not remotely high on them.
Yeah. Same.
I like the wacky picks. I thought that they had more of that up their sleeves, you know?
I mean, they misplay their wacky picks. Like their wacky pick, the way they pick. I spent a lot of time on Zig's bots in NA Academy.
True.
I
Oh
spent a
my
lot of time
goodness.
on Zig's bots. And last night I get a message from my AD carry, and he's just like, "Gadget Zig's bot is not it." It's like, agreed. Agreed. By the way.
Oh my god, I forgot about that.
So
But,
don't go too deep, but like give me a little bit of surface level
Yeah.
on what's so
Yeah,
not
sure,
good
sure,
about
sure.
that.
I think that their drafts are really good. So like UOL drafting is like generally really good, except for given accepting the fact that they blinded Cassidon versus
That's the only thing.
P-
That's the only thing.
PoE. Like that was I like the daring there, which was like
Yeah.
I'm blinding Cassidon versus PoE because I don't think he can play AD champs. I think that's a fair assumption to make,
That
given
is true.
PoE is like generally
Yeah.
accepted champ pool. I kind of like the balls on that draft, but in
Yeah.
general, like don't blind Cassidon, guys. It worked for them in play-ins because obviously, like
Blinding Cassidy is like saying you're not going to pick Talon. I know you're not going to pick
Uh,
Talon.
but in general, you know. And then I was part of a team that blinded Cassidon and enemy mid picked Talia. So, you know, shit happens. But
Oh my god.
a shout out to Vitality Jizuge. Anyway, but the reality of the situation is they get a lot of advantages from draft without really understanding how to min max the matchups. So it's like the draft itself is good and that carries them pretty far, but they misplay the champions that they have and they misplay like the game in general. So that's why they get huge advantages from drafted plans, and where a lot of other teams like just misplay in general. And then going into main stage, they're not going to do as well.
All right. Well,
That's it.
if no one has anything to bounce, then let's move on from unicorns. So let's talk FlyQuest a little bit here, because I think that they've earned it, especially today. Like, my heart goes out to them. Honestly, I wish they'd had a better first week. I'm not going to pretend like I can analyze FlyQuest that well, because they did way better than I ever expected them to. But coming out of the group, I feel like they've made an argument for themselves that they are maybe the best NA team alongside Liquid. Would you guys put them? Would you guys say they achieved more than Liquid, or where would you put them there? Or is that too abstract?
If you want most impressive individual game win, probably FlyQuest. If you want in general better performance, probably TL.
Yeah, I would agree with that because of course, like there's the top esports game.
Yeah.
And I do think that FlyQuest they're a team that is more willing to, obviously like Team Liquid changed that by its second round robin, but FlyQuest are a lot more of a limit testing team. Like if they see a fight, they will go for it. They have Ignore, so like that's inevitable. And I mean their players will buy into that, and I think that's a really great thing about that. So I think that's probably the benefit that FlyQuest has had over than their North American compatriots. The biggest problem is obviously just like I think I mentioned it already, their top side of the map. So like top side of the map is non-existent. Like it just doesn't exist. They ignore it. It's not there. They play mid to bot, but mostly mid. Even support goes mid. and they try and get power of evil as large of an advantage, or Santorin gets his own jungle advantage, which I think is a great way to play the game. But like you got to be able to cover your top lane when he's getting in certain instances, or at least have answers when they're going when he's A gonna get dove, or B is crashing a wave and it's dangerous. Like all of these things that I think that their solution is to do nothing for, which can work in North America, but especially in this meta, it was heavily punished, where you're playing towards topside carries. You're just gonna get picked apart. And even their finals versus TSM, I honestly believe that's how they lost. Was that they're a team that's forced to draft as well as they possibly can to kind of absorb Blow's top lane, while at the same time emphasizing getting a strong mid jungle duo and strong team fight, like just basically a self-sufficient bot side. So like this is something that they can do a lot. But if they went up against some of the better teams that are flexible, wants to play carry tops, and can contest a mid 2v2, like I think they ultimately are put in a really bad position. So I still think that, to answer your question, because I went on one a little wild, I think Team Liquid are the better team, in individual performance and consistency. But FlyQuest isn't too far away from that, and they also had the harder group. So
Yeah, definitely, especially in the first seed position there. Sorry, go on, Kelsey.
I think wasn't it like there was a record
This is a
game,
tough
the
point.
DRX game was like 0% jungle proximity to top lane. That's like the record for worlds is 0% jungle proximity to top
oh
lane.
my god, I think that's what
really?
it was.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
the stats, the Lolly Sports stats tweeted that it was like literally 0% in the DRX game today is the new record.
Oh my
Was
god.
that the
Jungle
game
Box.
where he literally had like the Jace was literally at his turret, his
Yeah.
inhibitor turret? Yeah, that's wild, isn't it?
Yeah, so I don't know. That's basically what I have to say there. I think one thing that I will comment
So
on
speaks for
is
itself.
so a lot of people were talking about ball-in in the TES game. So first of all, Lux Sprint / level 1. And having watched a lot more of Jackie Love You Yandra, I think it's actually insane how well Jackie Love does in lane with you Yandra as a support. Because that guy is
It's coming
so
out.
bad.
Yep.
It's coming out, guys.
He burns
I
Flash
thought
level 1 versus Blitzcrank. And then he just fucking walks it. It's fine. It's fine. You know? Whatever. But it's like that happens. I actually think Wild Turtle is one of the better laners in NA in bot lane. I think his team fight positioning is really bad. And he's really bad in general as a result, but his laning understanding is actually pretty above average in LCS. So the fact that they did kind of well in NA is good. Or they did kind of well in lane is good. They actually used the lack of flash advantage, which is kind of crazy to point out as like a positive thing, but I felt like there were a lot of times where LCS teams and worlds didn't really identify that they could pressure a flash disadvantage. So yeah, that was pretty good. Just like those types of basic things, acknowledging them, executing on them was really good for FlyQuest. It's crazy that I'm praising that.
I was gonna say that's
There we go.
rough because that's a low bar for a world's
It's
team.
crazy that I'm praising that, but that is like legit. Just understanding basic fundamentals is what won them that game. So good job. Like that's impressive to me from an NA standpoint. From a non-NA standpoint, let's see how much further we can push that, right? So.
Dagda, did you have anything on FlyQuest, or should we talk about the top two teams here?
No, I thought, kind of playing on what Kelsey said, playing through those fundamentals are nice, like seeing them exploit the bot side lack of flash. I was a bit confused by the Urgot lock-in by 369, but I think again FlyQuest did a nice job of punishing that. And I think playing out their dragon fights well, like using the Blitzcrank well, I really liked. Like having Ignar pick over the side, pull 3-6-9, and just automatically win the fight off of that one pick. So I think they did a good job of using the advantages that they had got to close out that game, and it was nice to see when I have watched other NA teams in Worlds just throw away those leads. So fair dues to them.
Yeah, it was nice to
It's
see
just
Ignar
I think.
on his Blitzcrank as well. Just like the lack of rocket grabs that he throws, like that you see a lot of situations before a team fight where he will just hold that for the longest time and just like pressure and pressure and pressure and pressure and buy a huge amount of space for his team, which you see even in competitive. You see a lot of Blitzcranks just go for the 50-50 throw instead of just hold it and use the space that you can buy with that. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, Kelsey.
Oh no, I was just going to say I think I remember blinding Urgot versus Raz once and going 0-6. So it's just funny in this particular context.
That's funny.
But in
Urgot
fairness,
is a weird pick
I
by
know the
going there.
path thought and should not have in that particular game.
Yeah.
So it was like same situation. Very
Urgot is just annoying. Urgot is the most annoying top lane pick because like I honestly think he's just safe. He's a safe top laner and he pushes out, so like that's something you just have to be aware of. But I think the Gnar pick into Urgot is really good because it's just like even though Gnar can be a little frustrating because you're just waiting on items and it's not nearly as impactful as picks like Renekton, especially at 6. The biggest issue that Urgot has is like if you're kited back consistently, then it feels like you literally can't accomplish much in your games. So that's the only thing. Otherwise, I think Urgot is a good pick. I like Urgot. It's just you have to cater to him. You can't just have a random Urgot in your composition.
All
You know,
right.
you can have your jungler path bot in that game. It would be really unfortunate. Anyway,
All right, let's very quickly talk top esports and DRX, but then let's hit on them properly in the quarterfinals because we are rapidly approaching the 2-hour mark. So I feel like we should start to speed things up a little bit. So top esports and DRX obviously both played very well across the course of this group. Top esports, we already talked about the loss versus FlyQuest, but across the group, obviously looking incredibly strong. I think it's fair to say that in individual play, there are some of the best players in the entire tournament on this team. But there are also a couple of issues for this team. You guys already mentioned Yanja, for example, is a bit of a glaring hole. Like, do you think that top esports have any other like big issues that are going to be showing up for them over the course of the next few games? Kelsey's nodding like crazy here.
Yeah, for sure. I have hated Karsus pathing all year. Absolutely. Actually, no. Spring, it was good because it was good for the meta. But as soon as they changed jungle XP, I've just despised almost every fucking game Karsus plays. So,
Again, guys.
yeah, I think this guy will play for expected skirmishes. He'll play for counter gank.
Yeah.
That's the best way to describe Karsus pathing is he plays for the counter gank that he imagines will happen. And my feeling is if you aren't, so in that situation, you're often pathing towards a side of the map where you're not getting prio, right? Most often than not. So the easiest counter to TS, in my opinion, in this meta is to just invade that side of the map because his laners probably can't do anything. He loses his camps and then he's really behind.
Yeah.
I think the reason why playing to jungle is meta, and I don't know why I have to explain this, but some people don't understand. But the way jungle XP works is if you have 2 prio lanes from draft, the expectation should be two level advantage on your jungler. You can't do that in any other role. You just can't. So I think that's why playing to jungle right now is just so insanely OP. TS don't do it, and that's a very exploitable problem that they have.
Dagda, do you want to bounce on this? Because I know you have like a pretty succinct way to describe the way that Karsa plays in regards to this team.
Well, I agree with what Kelsey was saying because I actually had this conversation with Lyric back in the middle of summer. Was really strange watching Carsa do this. Every single game was strong side to weak side clear, and he just meant that he lost out on the scuttle, and it was really frustrating me because I'd watch all the games and be like, "Why in the name of God are you doing this?" And I talked to Clement about it, Clement Chu, and he was kind of saying, "Look, I mean, exactly what Kelsey's hit the nail on the head is he does play very heavily towards his lanes and looking towards counter ganks, and the whole idea is, well, if I can just let my 3 lanes do their thing, I've got Jackie Love Knight and 369. Chances are they're coming out ahead, so just let them do their thing. But I do agree. I think it is something that it can be exploited, where if you end up invading on that side, you end up killing them, setting that behind, getting kills onto, say, that bottom lane. Well, Yanja is massively exploitable. Rookie also coming onto the world stage, mispositions a lot quite in lane, so and even goes over the aggressive in lane as well, where he can get caught out. So I think if you're able to set this in motion, and the team you can definitely win. And the team that we saw that with was V5. Like Wei getting in, invading early, getting a lot of those kills, and they churned a lot of that advantage in towards that bottom side of the map where they had PP God and SamD work through it. So if any team is looking to exploit them, I think you just look at what V5 did and just replicate it.
Raz, do you agree? Do you think that's a
I mean,
fair assessment?
I pretty much echo the counter jungling point. I can't. Yeah, it's something that I think top needs to be aware of. If a team just plays their lanes out, isolated, usually top would think that that's something that they should be happy with because they just have like individually like better players or um yeah, they just, like basically they would see themselves as better players and that would work well for their comp as a whole. But if a team just kind of cycles through um Karsus camps in the side of the map that he's not on, or even just contest him if you have prio through mid or something, then you're just gonna have an insanely far behind jungler, and you can guarantee that, um, like at least through the draft. So that's something that they just have to be aware of. Um, like top is not a team that is necessarily always getting leads in their early games, and if it is, it's because they're just like the first FlyQuest game they had was like they just had better skirmish. Literally, they just played better, which is the hardest thing to ever hear. Is that like execution errors were happening from FlyQuest side. Um, so like you can always kind of give them that, and I think the game that they had versus Kingzone by the end was also just very similar to that in terms of they're just high execution players, so that's always going to be a strength that they have. Um, but yeah, I think jungle is pretty much their weakness in how much he plays for his lanes. Not the role that he has, but like the extent to his role.
Mhm.
I also personally think Top Esports is a team that if they have to be the ones that are engaging, they're not particularly good at it. Yanja inexperience doesn't really set up his engages very well. 369 as well hasn't been the best of front lines for them, or to like say comparing them to Zoom. Zoom can find these super strong engages that can set up wins for the team fights. I don't see that from 369. So I think the biggest issue for Top Esports, and I think the game against FlyQuest to echo that a little bit, is if they need someone that actually has to go in and be that engage tool, they aren't really able to set that up correctly, specifically around objectives. So that's where they really start to fall off, and you can look to exploit that. And 369 hiding in that bush at the first dragon fight was just kind of the big tell for me that they're like they don't actually know how they're supposed to approach this properly, and you can punish it.
All right. If it's okay with you guys, I'm going to move the conversation on to the quarterfinals. I know we haven't talked about Dragon X yet, but I would like to transition into the quarterfinals by talking about Dragon X's quarterfinal first, because I think it's the least exciting quarterfinal to talk about. And I want to go.
You're gonna get
I want
3
to
O's,
build
so
the
what is there to
conversation.
say?
Yeah, so like let's start the conversation with Dragon X and like the positives there, and then finish the conversation with why those positives aren't going to be good enough against that one. How's that sound?
Okay.
So Dragon X, like let's talk. What's good about them? Because they've got Deft. Like, as a world's viewer for many years, that's usually a big plus, right? I feel like
Shogi,
he's been underperforming though.
that is their positive. Chovy is also their negative.
He
That
has
is all I
MVP
have
every
to
game,
say.
so I've heard.
Oh
about
my god,
DRX.
that's the most Kelsey thing I've ever heard. Just say they're positive. Just say just give me a positive note, Kelsey.
No, they're positive, also they're negative.
Oh my goodness.
No, I feel like Chovy is really, really insane. Chovy is crazy. That guy is so good. Actually, so good. I feel like, so I've heard unrealistic expectations that their coach has had for Chovy. Stuff like, okay, like I remember last year when they picked Ezreal mid into some really whack matchup. I don't even remember what the matchup was, but the explanation was like, if he spaces perfectly, then he should be able to just like completely dominate the lane and carry the game. It was like, I think it was versus something weird like Aurelia. I don't know, something that can get on you easily.
Yeah.
And I was just like, but he actually like performs under those expectations. It's crazy as fuck. Like this guy is insane. But I feel like he's literally late to every team fight. Like the fight is over before he's there.
No.
And I don't know if this is just a macro conception issue. This is a Piosik doesn't. Sometimes it's a Piosik doesn't come mid to help to escort or like help him like get prio so he can move. Sometimes he'll just be 2 kills up and do nothing, you know. But that's why I think it's just like this team should play so hard around whatever this guy wants to do. But it's clear that he's not expressive in what he wants to do based on how they play. So that's why that's why I made the comment.
They're definitely a team of very talented individuals. I feel like I say this a lot, and it's mostly based off degrees, right? Piosik is a very good Kindred player, and he's very good at button pressing. I think I'll give him that.
Sure.
It's like a monkey on a typewriter.
But like, I think he's really strong at that. I think some mistakes that he does make at times can just be, well, maybe it's an experience thing. Decision making is one thing that I hate on a lot for him. They just have young players in that regard, in him and Carrier. I think Doran's just not a very strong top laner at all. I think he's probably one of the weaker ones in the pool. I would have to actually look through a lot of these top laners to see if he's the worst one of the 8 teams. Actually, I'm just gonna do that right now, because I'm pretty sure it's a quick decision. And I'm just gonna say yes. I'm pretty sure it's a yes. So like I think in terms of a talent perspective, their top side of the map, not just their top laner, but also their jungler, are kind of like their pain points. Where Piosik is of course really talented, but he can have those moments like he did on his one of his Kindred games, where it's like he just had a block where he just mind farted. Like it was actually just crazy watching his play, where he fat fingered his ultimate. He was on Dragon when he had already fat fingered his ultimate, and his team had disengaged from it entirely. He lingered on the fight. Like there are moments where that happens, and I'm like, well, that you can't do that on stage. So that's the thing about him, and that limits them. But they do have insane players like Chovy and Deft that will hard carry, but they're not a team to me. They're not to me. They're not a unit that makes the same decisions, or at least make it very clear what kind of identity they have as a team. Because if you're just a team that's a really good 1-3-1 team, and you run like that shit time and time again, that's something that I can tell and can make very clear that it's like, oh, this is something that they really want to do every time, or at least like they've shown that they run that through repetition, so they don't make as many mistakes. But I feel like they've made the same mistakes with every comp that they ran, but they're just great teams. They're great players.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the biggest issues that they have that's gonna really fuck them in the quarters.
One thing I will say is justice for Sword.
There we go.
For me, all year Doran has been fine, but generally underwhelming. And so the line I always have in my head is, yes, Sword went like 80 CS down to the Shy, so maybe Doran would have gone like on 50 CS down. So I guess they just win now, right? Like, Justice restored. Anyway, that's all I have to say on
It's
that
like
Incredible.
topic.
have you
Incredible.
ticked the slightly above average bar? Okay, good, nice. So by that assessment, Raz, to me it sounds like this is like a very similar condition to what we're talking about with top esports, where it's like individually these players are exceptional, but whether or not that can
No,
combine is a different
I
conversation.
think Top is just a great team as well. I think a lot of their comps make sense as a unit. I think Karsa is a really good sticking glue to what the team needs as a facilitator. Um, and I also just think that even though I think Knight is really talented and understands what he needs to do
Mhm.
for the team. I think 360. I think they're just smart players that understand their roles. That while I think that that's not necessarily the case with
Okay,
DRX. So
this is a little bit
Yeah.
I think
more
I
Wild
think
West with
TS
that
played
DRX.
wrong. TS played wrong for the meta, but they play together, so that's big,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like Karsa's interviews are always a fucking crank, man. Like I remember 2016
He's very
MSI.
honest.
I interviewed him 2016 MSI in China, and he was like, "I'm a gambler," like that was his thing. And then now apparently someone did an interview with him asking what the meta was, and he was like, "If you're winning, you're the meta." That's the most Karsa line I can think of. Because like TS, they know what they want to do, and they don't give a fuck. Like if 100 people who are respected analysts in the scene, like in China, Korea, Europe, wherever, come to them and tell them you're playing the meta wrong, they'll just be like, okay,
Get a better
beat
meta.
us, like they'll
So
just be like, okay,
can you just
fucking beat us. I don't
can
care,
you just repeat the line? Sorry.
Oh, he said apparently in an interview he said on the Chinese broadcast
Uh-huh.
they asked him about the jungle meta, and he said, "If you're winning, you're the meta."
If you're winning,
Oh, if
you're the
you're
meta.
winning.
I like that.
Yeah, there we go.
Those
That
are
makes
words to
sense.
live
So
by.
that's like, yeah, I mean, that just kind of exemplifies TES, whereas like I don't like the way they're playing, and I don't think it's good in the context of the meta, but they're all on the same page, and that's really powerful, right?
Yeah.
So
That's literally the definition of confirmation bias. I love it.
yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah, I
Like
enjoy it.
It's also the definition of confidence, though, right? And
it's actually
confidence goes
really
a
funny
long way in
because
League of Legends.
I remember watching Karsa play on Flash Wolves. It was like him and SFM. This is why these two players were like really, really considered good at the same time and imported to China at the same time. Is their teams were just set up so that they could double scuttle. This is like when scuttle was first a thing, and their teams were literally just set up so that those junglers could double scuttle. And SFM has stuck true to that, right? So he's like the control variable, whereas Karsa is now like a dog jungler. It's just really funny to watch.
All right. Well, Dagda, do you want to bounce off of that? Or should we move the conversation on to Damwon and why they're going to absolutely crush this series?
No, I think the folks hit on everything, so I'm good to move on.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about Damwon here because they're up against DRX. This will be our fourth quarterfinal, but I want to kind of go in order of how excited I am for the quarterfinal. And I think Damwon DRX is the most like black and white, okay, this is over already type series. Like, I don't know. I'm struggling to think of a scenario in which Dragon X wins this series. I don't
You
even
think
have a good
it's
segue
more
to throw
one-sided?
to you guys with.
You think this is more one-sided than TS Fnatic?
I would say so. I would say that Damwon, in terms of, like, it's the same with Gen G as well. I think that Damwon straight up just wins any of the all Korean matchups.
I actually don't think that's the case. Holy shit, that's a great ass question. Cause I was wait a minute. Yeah, I was struggling with that. I think when I first saw the group draw, but now that I think about it, because I think Kingzone have the tools to learn, because they like as I had mentioned, like the players are really good. So I think that being in that group with Top, they should have gotten a lot of like usable information not even like information about top play. I'm just talking about like how they should fix their team
Yeah.
play. Um, I think that's all really good information, and I think that they at least have a chance to take a game where Fnatic, even though stylistically they have an avenue through jungle, um, I think top are just the tournament favorites. I actually just think that it's way too hard to play against them. They have literally every lane that can stomp you.
Yeah.
So I think that one's harder. I think Fnatic probably has the hardest matchup. While uh, maybe you're right, Dragon X can't take a game, but I actually think they're better positioned to at least get a game off of Damwon.
Fair enough. So you think Fnatic will not get a single game off of Top Esports, and you don't think that there's a like you're struggling to think of a way in which Top Esports gets a game off Damwon? Wait, hang on, no. Top Esports gets a game off Damwon. That's not what I was
For
intending
me,
to say.
I
Fnatic
think
gets
this
a
is
game
like
off
a
the top.
deceptively
Yeah.
interesting matchup, right?
Because
Like this is like
can I
Fnatic
sorry? Can I just
TES
add one
is-
thing to this question?
Okay, go ahead.
Because I think that like based on the assessment that we've just given over the last like 2 hours and 10 minutes, according to my OBS.
Yep.
The assessment of Fnatic was that like clearly the strongest part of their team was self-made, and the assessment
Yep.
of Top Esports was the two very weakest parts of their team are Yanja obviously is the clear weak link, but then also the way that Karsa plays. I feel like if Fnatic's biggest strength is their jungler and Top Esports' biggest weakness is their jungler, surely that is a boon for Fnatic in that matchup.
That's why I say like a Fnatic TES is a deceptively interesting matchup, right? Because I feel like Fnatic in general are the weakest team in quarters. Just blanket in terms of looking at lineups, skill, whatever. But they play more to the meta than TS does. So it like kind of weirdly reminds me of RNG versus G2 in 2018, right?
Yeah.
So for me, that's why it's like a deceptively interesting matchup, because it's like they could be an objectively worse team with objectively worse players in certain roles. Like obviously, I'm not saying like all of G2 were worse than all of RNG,
Mhm.
but they understand the meta better and they play to it better, so they win, right?
Yeah.
So I think that that's like a small possibility in
Yeah.
Fnatic versus TES. So that's why, for me, it's a deceptively interesting matchup. And I feel like if TES win this matchup, they're just tournament favorites, because that means that they really understand how to play against what is acceptably meta. And then they can just win off of that. If they
Yeah.
lose, obviously they can't win the tournament, but whatever.
Would you
That's
say
fair.
though that if they win off of that, then other teams could get a read on how they play against what is standard and therefore build on?
Maybe. I mean that's possible, but I feel like you can watch any of literally like their finals against JDG and understand how they play against standard, right? So it's not like necessarily new information, because Fnatic are kind of a worse JDG, but it's like at the world stage. Okay, they're probably going to get a big confidence boost from the quarterfinal, and it's just they're going to really, really dial into like playing their game and playing their game well. And if they can win the quarterfinal off of it, I think they win the tournament. But
Okay.
because I think the
Some-
Damwon
Ooh.
and TES are fundamentally similar teams, other than the way they play with jungle. They're fundamentally similar teams. And then if it just ends up coming down to team fights because TES understand how to play against that jungle style, then TES will win because of mechanical difference, and that's literally it. So
Yep. I think like my biggest thing is that your lanes definitely will make a jungle look better than they are. And I'm not necessarily saying that like Karsa is like it's not a commentary on his skill, it's a commentary to how good his lanes are.
Mhm.
So even though there may be a difference in how each team plays to their jungle, and I think that Selfmade has been playing really well with the resources that he's been getting. At the end of the day, Selfmade is going to be relying on Nemesis, and he's going to be relying on Whippo if he wants to be able to either keep people out of his jungle or be able to effectively counter jungle. And I think the problem will be that if they're going to, the 2v2s, I would always favor mechanically top. And so self-made really doesn't have many options in these lanes, and I would expect the top to fight and collapse rather than to concede more often than not. That's just what they've shown. So even if there's a perceived weakness, it, my opinion, won't turn into anything. But yeah, go on.
I just remember making this like almost exact call in G2 versus
Yep, that's why I love that
RNG, and
you
it was
called it.
like,
That's why I love that you called it out,
yes,
literally for that reason.
because I basically was just like, UZI and Ming, they're just fucking better players. It doesn't matter what the meta is.
Mhm.
And then they totally shit the bed in game 5.
So hang on.
Yep.
So
Are you drawing a conclusion here,
Mhm.
Kelsey, that perhaps Fnatic wins based on the meta?
I think Fnatic can win. I'm still gonna say TS, but I'm just triggered because I feel like if I say TS, that's making the same mistake I made in 2018, which I said at the end of that series. I was like, okay, fuck it. I'm always just gonna predict the better meta team, like always. And now I'm
Yeah.
saying, you know what,
Hmm.
TS win.
So my
So-
the
issue
Jackie
here
Love
is
and Knight are
that
too
I'm
strong.
I think
currently triggering my 2018 self right
There we
now.
go. I just think they're completely different subjects.
Mhm.
I agree with you. I think the reason why it's different is back then it was RNG incapable of playing to one side of the map because
Mhm.
it was a choice. Obviously, it was a choice that they had made. And Shahu could play LeBlanc and all this shit. They didn't want him to do it, or maybe he just didn't feel like it would fit well with the comps that they wanted to run. But with this team, they can literally play any lane they want to. They can play the Jackie Love. They can play the top side. Like it's not as if they're gimped
Sure.
in pick ban. It's just that, um,
But can they play the jungle?
yeah, can they play the jungle? I don't even think they need to because like I think jungle is such a well protected
But
role that
that's
if
the
you play the
problem.
opposite side, yeah, I think you can be hidden if in the jungle. It's been shown
Like
consistently you can be
the
hidden.
thing about the demo on TS game, right?
Yeah,
They were literally from draft incapable of playing the jungle, right?
of
Like
playing what jungle?
they were incapable of playing to jungle because they had like
Yeah,
no
yeah.
problems,
Yeah.
effectively.
Hmm.
So they just like I watched them. They just had to give like every prio camp in the early,
Yeah.
which is how Piosic got 3 marks, right? And they were only able to fight back after that. So that's why there's an angle.
Yeah.
There's definitely an angle for Fnatic to win. And if Fnatic
Okay.
played like any other style, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like player
Yeah.
diff, absolutely not. But because Fnatic play meta and TS do not, then there's an angle.
Okay.
I can get behind that. Dagda, where do you sit on this conversation?
For me, I think just the lanes I think are going to make it a lot more difficult for Fnatic to
Mhm.
try and play this heavily through jungle. I think when they give so heavily counterpick towards 369, I know he had like 65% counterpick rate or something for top side coming in towards playoffs. I think he'll have an advantage over Whippo. I think Knight should be able. There's so many nullifying mid lane matchups that Knight can actually just power home an advantage through. I know that sounds a bit weird to say, but I still think mid lane prio, as Raz was alluding to, I go over towards the
Nemesis is bad.
top.
I've done a deep dive on Nemesis, and Nemesis is bad. So whatever. Go ahead.
I think one of the biggest things that kind of gets overlooked for top is how good they are at outplaying engages. Like a lot of their wins actually come out of, hey, look, the opponent is actually going to come into us. They're going to come in with the Hecarim picks, these strong engage tools that are going to jump in on top of us, and we're just going to completely outplay everything that you want to do. And I think that's a little bit. It's hard to kind of point out in certain scenarios, but I honestly think that with the way Fnatic plays, the ability for top esports to just outmaneuver them in team fights is going to be just far above what the advantages they might come out of with from a jungle or from Hylissang being unlocked in the bottom lane.
So in LPL playoffs, I low-key think decided a good strategy against TES is to ban like Caitlyn Ezreal and other ADs that can carry team fights.
Yeah.
Because they fuck up their
Always.
mid game, their early game a lot, and they just get bailed out by like hand stiff on their carries. But if Jackie Love is on a more facilitator champ, I feel like that option is more limited.
I think Zoe
So
just because it feels like that ability to play at range, where you're just able to keep poking, and then we either win the team fight through that, or the opponents have to dive into us. And yeah, that ability to
but
outplay
then
them from
you're
range.
basically like giving, at this point, if you consider Twitch meta or Senna a problem, because Jackie Love has made Senna look like a team fighting late game scaling AD carry. At this point, then you're giving Syndra to Knight, right? You're opening a lot of options in draft, but at the time of LPL playoffs, like I felt like Ezreal and Cave were solid bans versus TS. So I don't know. We'll see.
Mhm.
I think TS, like I still will pick TS to win, but I think there are options for Fnatic that definitely exist.
So, looking at this series, then, can I ask you guys to give me a prediction on how you think the series will go, or is this too? Have you not had enough time to peruse the matchup?
The Fnatic top series.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's 3-0.
3-0 top esports.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Dag, do you agree?
I will give the universally pussy answer and say 3-1. So. And I can use the word pussy
SMH.
because I have one. The end.
SMH.
If that ain't justification, I don't know what is. I love it. All right. Sorry, did you want to say one last thing on that, Raz? Nope. Okay, let's move on. So since you guys universally agreed that Top Esports Fnatic was the least interesting, let's then move to Down 1 DRX. That I tried to start the conversation off, and it somehow became the Fnatic Top Esports conversation. I'm not entirely sure.
I still think this is the least interesting one. So I agree with you.
Thank you.
Yep.
DRX Down 1 is least interesting.
I think this is just Down 1 3-0. I don't really see a world where Down 1 where Dragon X wins this.
I think it's another 3-0.
Yep. I'm done for 3-0 here.
Dagda?
So.
Yeah, I agree. 3-0 as well. I think this is just going to be a
All right.
repeat. Yeah.
Let's move on. Let's fuck this quarterfinal. All right, let's talk about. Let's finish with the all LPL Suning JDG because I think there's a lot to talk about there. Let's do Gen G versus G2 because I think stylistically that's quite two dramatically different teams where you've got Gen G that generally will play a slower, more controlled style and want to play the team fights, whereas G2 somewhat unpredictable, but also not really that comfortable in the current meta. But I would say that neither team is particularly the best at playing this like jungle carry centric meta right now. Mm-hmm. So I feel like this is a much more difficult matchup to just say like, oh, these guys are really great at the meta. I'll give it to them kind of thing.
This is the best possible pool one team for G2. That's all I have to say. Like,
yeah, I'd agree with that.
They got an insanely good draw. So Tien and
they got no LPL teams, so no 3Fs.
Ended up doing them well, you know. So there you go. I feel like both Fnatic and G2 got like decent-ish matchups for. So like Ning and I guess Ning and Tien felt bad for BTFOing them in the past 2 World Championships. So whatever. But yeah, I think. If you don't play hard for jungle matchup, then you don't beat G2. Like, that's just the way that I feel about G2 right now. So, I think G2 can just play whatever the fuck, just play how they played in playoffs. You know, if they do that, and they play for mid advantage,
I have a question to bounce off of that, Kelsey, because the way we've described top esports is that they basically don't play off a jungle matchup, right? So would you say that G2 potentially could beat top esports if say that were the matchup?
If they both did that, I think bot diff is actually.
You're right. Get out of here. Don't put more thought into this.
No, I haven't actually thought about this. So it's a good question. I feel like G2 and JDG are like the quote unquote smart teams, depending on like with the caveat being that they both have like dumb things that they do. G2,
I feel like I've
you
segued
have,
really
like,
hard here by accident, but I'm
it's
actually interested
really
in your
hard.
answer.
It's actually a lot harder than I thought that it would be.
Do you gentlemen have anything to throw in here to?
I think G2 could
To
beat
sway.
them, but I still like slightly favor TES.
Uh-huh.
I think that would be like a 3-2.
I would
One
say there
thing.
was like a 3-1 at best in favor of top
Yeah.
esports,
Really?
just
Yeah.
off of like eye
But
test
you're
alone.
not going to punish. You're not going to punish G2's biggest weaknesses, which is their bot and their jungle, or because
I would say
Yuyan
Jackie
Ja
Love
is
and
not.
Yanja would still out 2v2.
I mean, Yuyan Ja is like Yuyan Ja is like so bad actually, and I think Mickey X is the best support in the tournament, like straight up. He just is. If you watch the G2 games,
I
like
think
Mickey X has consistently made the best plays of any support in
his
the tournament.
bard, especially, I think he played exceptionally well.
I think Perks is hard inting, which
I
is like
agree.
hard to say because I feel like Perks is the heart and soul of the team, but Perks is like fucking hard inting. But Mickey X is the best performing support in the tournament. And then Yuyan Ja is
him
like,
and
it's
Hilly.
the opposite.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the opposite for TES, where it's like Jackie Love is potentially the best performing AD in the tournament, and Yuyan Ja is the it's fucking trolling. Like,
Yeah.
so
I do think I would actually, because I think Hillsong has been really fucking good. So I would actually say Hilly, but I think between him and Mickey X for sure.
Isn't it just
no,
crazy though
Mickey
that
X makes,
both
like, the
Mickey and
X
Hilly,
mechanical person, yeah.
yeah, isn't it crazy that both Mickey and Hilly are kind of known for being fairly inconsistent? And yet in this tournament specifically, they're both like playing exceptionally consistently. Like
Hilly
that's
for
think
sure. Hilly for sure.
So, like last year, my assessment was that G2 understand the support meta really well, and they've just like kept to that. The problem with EU is that they haven't then adapted to understand the jungle meta. So, like China, certain regions understand the jungle meta better, and then also have a good supports that do similar functions to EU sports. So for me, it's like, okay, Yuanja, like bot lane ends up being determined by supports more often than not. And if Mickey X is the best performing supports in the tournament, then it's harder to get an advantage through bot than normal, even though Perks is hard trolling. And then from that, it's like, okay, both junglers are going to play this. But if you watch Yengo's preview, he's constantly watching wave states. So I feel like he's like the better Cursa, as shit as it sounds. So then it basically just comes down to the solo lane matchups for me. So like, who do you think is better? Legitimately, I think like Wonder Caps are really, really good. I also think that 369 Knight is really, really good. Like they're probably better, but it's not insanely cut and dry.
I
So.
think
Knight is better than Caps, but I would actually
So-
give Wonder the edge over 369, personally.
That's interesting.
I would have gone the
because
other way actually.
I think they're functionally the same stylistically, like team stylistically. I think for sure Knight and 369 are better and have like a larger pool that they can play towards. I think the biggest question to me is how they want to play out their comps, because I wasn't really happy that Top has been like, or at least have tried to put Knight on more like facilitating duties
Yeah.
to kind of play to carry jungles. Because I think one thing that Caps has
Same for
struggled with.
G2, but yeah.
That is true. That is same with G2.
Yeah.
One thing that Caps has kind of struggled with a lot of the times is that his prior international events, he's usually gone for the more side lane team fight oriented pick, like Kali, Silas technically to a certain degree, and that would leave him really wide open to like Orianna picks or something that was more in like kind of centered around just stomping lanes. And I think that's something that I kind of would caution, is I think Caps' major strength that I've seen more often and valued is that he is really good later on in the game and making more like the smarter side lane decisions, and also roaming more frequently early on in these games when he has prio, but not necessarily the 1v1, like the raw laning aspect. And it's not necessarily like a mechanical difference. It's literally by choice and how he plays his lanes. So that's where I would say if we're just talking about raw laning, I would say both top solo laners are better in that respect. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I think they function the same way though.
I think that G2 is better at playing to mid, though.
Mm,
If they accept that that's what they should do,
yeah.
they're better at doing that.
Yeah, I
Unfortunately,
agree with that.
I think they have not accepted that, and they have tried to play the jungle more, which means that I've seen, like, for example, in the Syndra Kali game, I've seen Caps give up, like, potentially winning lane states. They won the finals, by the way, if you watch, by Caps, like, pressuring lane state differences, particularly game 5,
Yeah.
if you watch Corgi. So for me, it's really hard to see them just giving up that type of advantage that they can generate. Because I think their mid jungle 2v2 is the best at the world championship. Like, Yankos always is looking at wave states, always trying to play off of them.
hmm
Caps, really insane at wave management. So the fact that, like, they consistently just found 2v2 advantages mid jungle is something that I think in LPL or not LPL, TS is not as good at, because, like, Knight is really good at understanding the wave states. So then if Carson doesn't come, then he just flashes for the to try to 1v2, which is really troll. Compared to, like, those kinds of things, I feel like G2 have the best 2v2 mid jungle tournaments, and if they play to that, then they can win games. If they do not, then they are gonna lose, because their understanding of how to play the jungle carry meta is fucking bad, and that's kind of like where I am. I feel like they would lose to TS based on that.
Okay.
The biggest issue
But it would be close. Yeah.
that I think I have with G2 is I agree with the points that have been made, but I think their objective setup has been really poor this tournament. And I think for top esports specifically, who will fight you for every single objective, whether it's good for the composition or not, I think can definitely look to exploit it. And kind of going back to those two Suning games where there was the Scion where they just didn't play through where Wonder was actually on the map. You end up Suning taking this massive advantage off of that dragon fight, and then the same again in the one prior to that as well, where they didn't set up the wave crash properly in mid, go for this bot lane dive, which ends up giving Suning advantages as well. Like, I think top esports nearly take that to a level above again on Suning, and I think if G2 are going to end up running into similar scenarios where they're not setting up correctly for these cross map plays, I think they end up in a lot of trouble.
I think G2 is set up really well for the objectives they want. If they don't give a shit about the objective, they won't bother. So, from that perspective, maybe I disagree. But yeah, that's it.
So I do want to segue the conversation a little bit here, because we are getting pretty far off of track.
Sure.
So let's return, because we were talking about technically G2 and Gen G, since G2 aren't going to play top esports. And I realized I actually initiated this massive segue, so I will fully take the brunt for that. But Gen G and top esports are two pretty dramatically different teams. So when it comes to Gen G, how do you guys feel like this matchup plays out? Because I don't think that Gen G is the kind of team that are going to just get straight 3-0'd necessarily. But do you guys feel like G2 have the advantage based on lanes? Do you feel like Gen G are a team that are going to be able to fight back? Because this is one of those series, for me at least, as the play-by-play caster here, that I actually find it more difficult to really give a significant opinion on how this is meant to go.
This is the best, like I said, this is the best possible pool 1 team for G2 to draw. I think they win. I think that their greatest advantage is in their mid lane, and BDD's greatest advantage is also in their mid lane. Gen G's, I called them BDD because they are basically BDD.
Yeah.
But Gen G's greatest advantage is also in their mid lane, but they don't acknowledge it remotely. And they allow BDD to give up advantages to play for bot lane, which everyone says that Ruler is potentially one of the best ADs in the tournament, but I think he's fine, you know? He's good. He's definitely top, but I don't think his laning is the most insane ever, which is why he frequently needs to be bailed out by BDD. So for me, this is the easiest possible matchup G2 could hope for. So I'm looking at G2 3-0 or G2 3-1. So
I think it's gonna be a 3-1 for G2. I also think the G2 is gonna win. I think the reason for that is, I mean, Group C was pretty weak. I think a lot of the strengths that we saw from top lane are not gonna exist versus Wonder. I think that the strength for GNG has always been in their team fighting, but at the same time, watching how they played versus LGD, and Fnatic, like they can really start to snowball in the opposite direction if they are just like uh, I don't even know what to say sometimes. Like when they went up against like when Gen G went up against Fnatic, like their early game was so insanely doomed. And I'm talking about the Rakan game because like even though I mentioned Rakan and it wasn't really the reason why they just so lost, right? Because like even in the Rift Trail decision from Kled, he walks in, he dies because he's just trying to like smite steal it. Like it feels like everything is so individually minded, and they're not actually thinking about what they want to do as a team when enemy is like fighting for Rift Herald or when the enemy is grouping for a top lane dive. I just don't see what their team decision is, and it feels as though when they're in a position in which they're in a deficit, they're not actively thinking about what they want to do, or like respond. Like what are they trading for? That's one thing that I was really concerned about. They can also just get dragged into like team fights that they don't want, like they shouldn't want to fight, which is a concern for me. So I just think that all of the strength that Gen G or perceived to have is just, G2 can do better. So I think this one's pretty straightforward because their strengths line up pretty well with G2, and that G2 kind of just have, for me, shown that they can do it at a higher level.
Dagda, do you agree with that?
I agree with the two folks, and I'm going to take this to run to the bathroom real quick because this show's going a lot longer than I expected. So I'm going to be back in a little bit.
Oh, we got 2 bathroom breaks.
Fair enough.
We take them.
I also have the bladder of a small child, so I'm going to
every
give it
time an
back once he gets
LPL
back. But
comes up, we have like 4 different takes.
Yeah.
because all of us watch LPL.
So-
so it's fine.
Kelsey, you gave me 3-0/3-1. Raz, you never actually gave me a score on that matchup.
On
I'll just
on
give
the
it to
G2,
3-0 because
G2
I
one?
don't want to be an asshole. So
On GT
the G2 matchup, the G2 Gen G, I said it was 3-1.
3-1. Okay.
Yeah.
yeah,
And
you said 3-1.
I'll get Dagda's take on when he gets back.
I'll
We
just
kind of
say
already
3-0.
talked Tez versus Fnatic. I don't know if we ever got predictions on that one though. I feel like we kind of just
I
talked.
think we did. I said 3-0 for that one.
You said 3-0. But Kelsey,
Yeah.
you
Said
were
3.
more like sorry, what did you give a prediction? Because I feel like you were more airing
She gave
towards
the
the
Travis
Fnatic
Stafford
side.
response of anything can happen. That's what she did.
It's
She's
way
like,
harder.
yeah,
No, it's legitimately way harder because I just keep
I know. I'm
thinking
just
of
trolling.
my 2018 self. I think I said 3-1. I think I said I would give the pussy answer because
I feel like
have
you
a
said
pussy.
3-1.
Yeah, you did.
If I remember. So Dagda's back. Dagda. Oh, he's not. His headphones on yet. All right. So I just need to quickly double check. I'm not sure if you gave an answer on Tez Fnatic, and we need your answer on Gen G versus G2. So what are your predictions on those two series?
Top esports Fnatic were 3-0, and then the Gen G G2 was 3-1 G2.
3-1 G2.
There we
Okay.
go.
Yeah.
So since we've got an all LPL cast here, essentially, let's talk about the last quarterfinal here because that's the most exciting one.
Nice.
Suning against JDG.
Is it exciting?
I think it's exciting because I love Suning, and no matter what, I'm gonna back Suning. 3-2, baby, let's go. But guys, tell me why JDG are gonna beat Suning.
By the way, to give quick context, we have broken Munch's heart today because he texted me earlier on saying, "Can't wait for the Sunni Fnatic finals." So
No. Hang on. No, I said I'm heartbroken that there cannot be a Suning Fnatic final.
sorry.
We have to have a Suning Fnatic semi-final instead. How devastating is that?
For me,
to clarify that, I'm a Fnatic fan since season 2, and I've adored Suning this year. So moving on. Anyway,
There you
Raz,
go.
you were saying.
To me, Suning has been a team that has been probably performing better so far in the tournament. Like for sure they have been in comparison to JD. I think that Ben has felt really comfortable for the reasons we explained through like our group stage conversation. So I think Suning are looking really good, but also like I don't want to ever base too much of what we're seeing on the group stage best of ones. We've seen that too much in previous international events. I think JDG are this smarter team. I think JDG are less kind of there's a word for it, impulsive. They're a less of an impulsive team, and so like they'll pick smarter fights. Where we already saw what SOFM does sometimes, especially like he'll see like a specific fight or skirmish that works well for him, but sometimes he doesn't really think about the lanes around him. Like I think this group stage he's actually been doing a really good job of like being able to pull Angel and Ben, but sometimes he can get ahead of himself. So I think Zoom I think like they have like good talent to match, and I think they're a team that are pretty smart in how they draft. And I just think they'll take the series, what, 3-2? I'll say 3-2. I'll say 3-2. I have a lot of, yeah,
Interesting.
I'll say 3-2. My gut feeling is usually 3-1 in these instances, but I think that Suning are a pretty active team that they can claw back deficit.
Personally,
I think Suning are weak to the exact thing that JDG are good at, and they don't have a good mid laner.
Yep.
So JDG's biggest exploitable weakness is not functional. I am predicting JDG 3-0. So
God damn. That one's actually for me the most surprising one.
yeah.
I'm gonna flip on the middle ground and just go 3-1. I think
For who? Who to win?
JDG.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Suning have looked a hell of a lot better than they did in the regular split. I think Angel stepped up a lot. We were already talking about that a bit, especially being able to bring out the Akali and stuff like that. I think is really cool to be able to see from this guy. I just don't see them being able to play their style as much as they want to. Like playing so heavily through Ben in the early stages of the game, trying to move Sword out of that bottom lane as well. I think JDG are just going to be able to counteract it so well. Zuma's been phenomenal on the top side. They don't give them that advantage. I think Lumeo is a better roaming support than Sword Art. He does a kind of a similar job in certain situations. So I just overall think JDG just end up winning through that early stages and then powering that home in their strong team fights.
I wanted to, for stylistic reasons, see the opposite of what we saw in the LPL semis, which was the LGD, JDG, and Suning TS, because I feel like stylistically the opposite would have been a much more interesting matchup. But so I am excited about these quarters. However, I do think it will be a JDG 3-0, just because I think that both of them do play for jungle matchup. However, the way that Suning plays is like Top is going to play like a psychopath, and as I've explained, Zoom is a very unique, almost unique. Like I think the only other player who I've seen achieve like international greatness and success being able to play multiple styles and like carry from survive side is Olamna. So that would be like the two players I would put in this category. I think that he's very uniquely strong, and so the way that Suning have been playing is not going to grant results as easily, just because there will be a matchup with the jungler that actually understands camp trades and XP advantages. So for me, it's just hard.
How hard are we talking here? Are we talking like 3-0 hard?
Yeah, I said 3-0. So I think JDG 3-0.
Is that unanimous here? I obviously missed a small amount.
Dagda said 3-1, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I said 3-2.
Raz said 3-2. So
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah.
But you all say JDG.
Yep.
How could you do this to me? I'm gonna say 3-2 Suning.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
Less based on analysis and more based on what my heart tells me. But you know, I'm just gonna leave it. I'm just gonna let it settle.
There we go.
I'm gonna allow people to take
And
from
Darcy
that what
was
they
lying
will.
once, and he just never turns
Because
back.
I think the top lane matchup.
Just
I think the top lane matchup is insane. I actually think Angel maybe could get the better of Yagao in the mid lane. But I think Huanfeng is the secret weapon. I think he's not been unlocked yet, and I think that there's a little bit of lock picking required there. But Huanfeng with the right draft, with the right situation, I think can pop off in a big way, and I'm excited to see that. And I believe in the Lions. All right, there's only one Lion-based team left in the tournament, and I think Pride Rock is at stake here. So I'm gonna go with the.
How many people in this call have seen Battleship Potemkin?
Have seen what? Sorry,
Battleship Potemkin.
Oh,
never even heard of it.
It's one of the greatest films ever made. But there is a section where they have a lion statue that goes like extremely more alarmed after like 3 cuts. It's a Russian film from the 30s. Anyway, but the lion statue.
Like, I've seen a lot of Russian
extremely-
films through the 30s, but this is the one that skipped my radar.
the lion gets extremely more alarmed with each cut, and I realized that I had the perfect situation to use like that cut progression in a meme during Mad Lions' play-in stage,
Well,
and it didn't occur to me until after.
you might
Anyway,
get another chance.
yeah, so I'm basically banking on the Sunny JDG series here. So
All right.
fun times.
Well, we're just about rounding out the conversation here. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, do you have any final thoughts on the quarterfinals that are coming up, and any last things that you want to say to our audience before we close out the show here? We'll start with you, Raz.
I think we're gonna get some banger games. The top 8 for me has been, at least this one, probably just the strongest individual talent I've seen. Maybe I say this every year because there's a little bit of emotion that comes into it, but a lot of the teams that we are sending, the 3 LPL, 3 LCK, and even just like the 2 European teams, I think can all on a good day take a series. So it's definitely exciting because even though I've predicted maybe 2 3-0s, there is definitely an avenue in which they can fight it out, where in the past I've usually been like, there's no way.
Fair enough. I like that. Kelsey, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I think this quarterfinals draw is actually really cool. I know a lot of people are disappointed because there isn't LCK LPL matchup potential until the finals, but I like the run back. I would really like the run back, like narratively, of the LPL bracket and the LCK bracket with random EU teams.
The 2 imposters.
Yeah, I really like the narrative of, okay, what have these teams learned in the meantime? Can they change it up? And then how do they deal with, like, okay, basically G2 just got plopped into the LCK court semifinals, and Fnatic just got plopped at the LPL semifinals, right? So how do you deal with that situation? I think it's really interesting. So really kind of happy about how the draw went, even though it probably is somewhat new for some people.
Dagda, where are you at?
Just kind of bouncing off the draw, I'm really happy, unless we get the EU final, that there's probably not just one region in the final, because that was going to be my biggest worry coming out of this. Was like, even if we end up with like 2 Korean teams or 2 LPL teams or whatever in the finals, it just wasn't going to be the same. So I'm glad that in theory we should end up with at least 2 different regions in the final rather than just the same region final.
Nice. Well, I think that's about time that we round out the show because we are nearing the 3-hour mark here. which is a lot longer than I'd intended as a runtime. But I appreciate you all sticking around. I appreciate the conversation. Thank you very much, Raz and Karen, for joining us here. Karen, I'm saying Karen because it's on my screen. It's Kelsey Moser here. Thank you very much for joining us, guys. If you want to shout out what you guys are up to right now, do you want to call out something that people should go subscribe to or follow or whatever? Now is your opportunity before I close out the show. Raz, do you want to go first?
Shout out to myself going to sleep after this. That's about me.
Nice.
And shout out to Golden Guardians.
I'm impressed that you can sleep after 2 coffees, but you know, each to their own.
Still drinking it too. I have superpowers.
All right, Kelsey, what are you up to right now?
I will make content because there is break from scouting. 100 Thieves Academy go, even though they technically were 3-1 against us this entire season. We won the last match. So, what is really most important? That is the question. We won the last match with a jungle change. So,
Nice.
I'm just saying. There was so much hype going into that matchup if you follow Academy, though, because Raz was saying on Hotline League that, you know, it's so nice having a full team of players for a full season. And I typed in chat, I will beat you with my jungle with a jungle change in the first fight, and I did. It was great.
It shouldn't have happened. It happened.
What happens in Hotline League stays in Hotline League.
I thought it was the most hilarious thing too. There's like another piece of content where like they were hyping up Kenvi, and I was like, I always want to support like new junglers as well, but obviously like just for the show of it, I was like, I will, focus Kenvi down, blah blah blah.
Yeah,
and I was like, what actually ended up happening was literally an invade that screwed Kenvi over. I was like, I didn't expect that, but we'll take it. We'll take it.
No. Kenvi got screwed over by a cheese invade, which, by the way, I think is bad objectively.
It's not a cheese invade.
I said we would talk about it at the end of the season, but I think it's bad objectively.
All right.
My team reacted poorly to it.
Is bad objectively.
The most hilarious part of it was, which is why it's like Fake God Zoom, right? Which was like Fake God was like, he's still top lane because Hard was just sitting top in the brush. Well, Kenvi was farming, and Fake God and Comps was like, he's still top. By the way, he's still in the bush.
Well,
have a fun time, guys.
What I've learned tonight is that maybe I should start an NA Academy podcast. That seems like potentially where the banter is at. We're going to close out the show, though. Thank you very much, Raz and Kelsey, for joining us. Dagda, as always, thank you very much for being with me here. We're going to close out Bevvies with the boys. I've enjoyed having Bevvies with you guys, and I hope you've enjoyed being with the boys. And with that, we're going to close out the show. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you in Champs League.